Sometimes in life, you encounter things that perceptions become the reality. And I don't mean that they literally come to fruition. I just mean that if you say something long enough or you tell yourself something long enough, eventually it rings true. And so then you say, see, it was that way all along.
I will be a millionaire. I will be a millionaire. I will be a millionaire.
By the way,
I will hit the lottery.
The Mega Millions, I hit the Mega Million number.
Really?
Yeah, the one number, the little not the Powerball, but it's kind of like the Powerball. At the end, there's the yellow number.
Yeah.
I hit that. $2, baby.
Congrats.
$2. And I'm not one of those fools that goes, I'll just use it to buy another ticket. No, sirree. I take my money, cash out, and break even. Give me my $2. I want my $2. That happened yesterday. But I'm trying to think of an example of something that you just almost negatively, there becomes an unfair stereotype about it or an unfair perception about something that then you can never shake it. You can never get out from underneath that label, be it unfair. And last night I wondered as I'm watching the Pacers game whether or not we weren't seeing before our very eyes exactly that. And you brought it up, Eddie, and it's a very good point. And there's plenty to talk about over the course of today between, Indiana's game, obviously the tournament field, Purdue. There's a ton to get to here, right? Senior night for Purdue, high school basketball, and the Pacers last night in Houston. But Jerry Palm's going to join us coming up bottom of the hour to talk college basketball. And, of course, he's got a pretty keen eye on Purdue as well, but just in general the tournament. So we'll get to that bottom of the hour. Pantera tickets to give away today as well. So we got a pretty loaded show. But let's begin with the Pacer game last night and the battle of perceptions and reality. The Pacers right now are clicking on all cylinders, essentially, okay? And, yes, Houston, who is talented and young, and I think they desperately miss Fred VanVleet when he's not in there because even though he's not a dynamic, he's making $42 million a year, he is the elder statesman of that team to a great extent. I think kind of holds them together. But when Houston got within in the third quarter, closed the gap on the Pacers went on an 18-3 run and kind of in the blink of an eye. And it was the usual cast of characters that got things going. I thought once again, as we've talked about now for a while, Obi Toppin, there's something about when he comes in, all of a sudden the rev limiters go up. You were clearly balanced. Nesmith continues to play at a high level. Siakam, you know what he is. Turner had a couple of key plays that jump-started things. And the biggest thing being Tyrese Haliburton was Tyrese Haliburton once again. What he's able – 15 assists with 2 turnovers. He is now setting – he is on a mark here on pace. He's setting records, essentially. He's doing things that are almost not almost unprecedented. Some of them are unprecedented, right?
2 turnovers, Jake. I don't know. He might be slipping.
That's right. For example, he has the second most games in NBA history with 25 or more and 15 assists with 5 3-pointers. I mean, that's an odd combination of stats to look at, but the second most games in NBA history with that. Since the All-Star break, 84 assists and 8 turnovers. I want that to be 11-1. But Haliburton clearly is playing at a very high level, and that is what he is. The guy, he is the foot on the accelerator, and then all the other pistons start firing right in unison.
Yep.
Here's my question about perception and reality, and we're going to go back on a history lesson here. The Pacers, because of their success rate, we became accustomed to the Pacers not drafting inside the top 10. Okay? They had the occasional top 15 pick, Eric Dampier. They had a lot of first-round picks late that they would trade because they were already established, they didn't have room, and they would trade for a younger player or a future pick. When they selected Benedict Mathurin, we were thirsting to a great extent for who is going to be the next franchise player for the Pacers. We didn't yet know that Haliburton was going to grow into that guy, or not even grow into it, but all of a sudden be bubble wrapped in Sacramento, and bada boom, he's ready to go in that capacity, okay? So Mathurin, when he was drafted, it was, this is the guy. Kevin Bowen's talking about building a statue. I sent a tweet at a game once that just said Benedict Mathurin is that dude, and he knows it, the way that he walks and everything else. And then the perception became, because there were games, yes, where he would have 30, and then other games where he'd have 5. And people started saying, is it possible with this high-flying offense of Haliburton spreading the ball around and Siakam getting it on the block and then whipping it around and Shepard hitting corner threes and Nesmith hitting a 3 from the wing and Miles Turner popping out or being active underneath and Nembhard with his incredible, mid-range game and T.J. McConnell running around in a circle 3 times and then hitting like an awkward fall away from 8 feet over a 7-footer. These are in Obi Toppin flying in from the side. All of these things happening almost in unison with one another, the perception became that perhaps Benedict Mathurin was the one player that was slowing down their offense, and that Benedict Mathurin was kind of flypaper when the ball came to him. And then all of a sudden everything slowed down because Mathurin's only way to contribute offensively was to, for himself, set himself up for his own shot, or if he is not getting his shot, he doesn't cohesively flow with the rest of the offense. Now, I don't necessarily believe that to be true, but I understand why the perception is of that. Because he is when he gets the basketball, he's not necessarily a quick release scorer. He likes to put the ball on the floor. And as a result of that, and he's not necessarily somebody that looks to pass first per se. I don't think he's a selfish player by any stretch of the imagination. But in comparison to everything else I just mentioned, it feels like that way about him. And it feels like if you were to pick one guy, okay, who's the one guy that, I'm not saying anybody dislikes him, I'm not saying he doesn't get along, but who's the one guy that doesn't feel like a piston that moves in unison up and down with every other cylinder? You would maybe say Mathurin if you had to pick one. Mm-hmm. Now, is that perception becoming a reality based strictly on the fact that Indiana's offense right now is playing at its probably most cohesive, most efficient, and highest level of the season in the games where he's out with a sprained wrist? I think personally that is probably just totally unfortunate timing for Benedict Mathurin. I think that it is a coincidence. But I understand, and maybe it's time to start looking towards Eddie. Is it possible that Mathurin is, in fact, I'm not going to say somebody who slows down their offense when he's out there, but of those players that I mentioned, even though he is in the top 3 or 4 in talent, is he the one that is the player that they can most afford to play games without because of the fact that they play so well in unison without him?
I think you're looking at this short-sighted a little bit too, Jake. Go back to last year. Mathurin goes down late in the season with the torn labrum or rotator cuff. I can't remember which one it was. It was a shoulder injury.
Shoulder, yep.
But and then they go on the run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, a lot of that having to do with, injuries by the Knicks and the Bucks. But you still look at that team last year and you're like, okay, there's another step that they can take forward. And some people forgot about Benedict Mathurin last year because of this postseason run. And then when they started running into the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, everyone's like, oh, yeah, we've got this guy that's not there. So then, maybe they can, compete better against Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think there's a little bit more of an understanding between everyone because of that playoff run right now that allows them to be more cohesive when it's Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, and Turner out there on the floor.
I do think, and look, open disclaimer. And by the way, good afternoon to you on a Wednesday. My name is Jake Query. That is Eddie Garrison. It is Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. You folks, of course, all part of the company. We love it. We're grateful for it. We have assigned job titles to most who have called in over the course of, what's it been, 2 years now, Eddie, something like that?
Sure, yeah.
A year and a half, 10 months? I can't recall. It all runs together since we've done this show. But Nonetheless, we have fun with it, and that's our goal today. You know that I have occasionally I wear glasses, right?
19 months to answer your question. We are 5 months away from the 2-year anniversary.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
5 months and I think like 16 days.
Are you going to get me a pendant? Any sort of a gift?
Are you going to get me a gift for putting up with you for this long?
Okay. Eddie, there are people that pay money at charity auctions to spend 3 hours with me. I mean, you should be grateful for this incredible opportunity.
You should be grateful for this incredible
very
opportunity.
Facetious, by the way. Have you ever seen the movie or the TV show Trailer Park Boys?
I have not.
It's done in Canada, but there's one character on it that wears like super, super thick glasses, kind of like the guy in Office Space that has this Milton with the stapler. Similar, okay? I admittedly look at the Pacers with one particular player kind of with those glasses on, and it narrows my vision because I'm tunnel focused on positives about this guy. You know the Pacer player that is admittedly my favorite player, right?
Yes.
We all have our favorite player.
Uh-huh.
We all have our favorite player. Kevin Bowens, like I said, is Benedict Mathurin, no doubt about it. I think J&V is Miles Turner, very understandably because Miles Turner is incredibly important to what they do. Do you know who mine is? I'm going to ask you to write down the initials on a sheet of paper and hold it up, and I will see if you, in fact, are aware. We'll see how well we know each other as. How do you not have paper near you?
I don't have paper.
How are you anticipating communicating with me over the course of the show if I'm talking and you need to send me some sort of message?
I just text you or just throw stuff at you or, just go over the microphone and tell you, hey, Jake, you suck.
I mean, well, I'm used to that. There is one guy, though, that to me, I look at on this Pacers roster, and when his numbers are high and his contribution is there, it is sign to me that they are clicking on all cylinders. Because Haliburton is going to have great games because Haliburton has the ball in his hands. I asked Eddie to write down 2 initials. He's still writing.
Well, I was going with one name, and then
just the initials.
Screwed up
2 letters.
Yes, and then I screwed up the initials. I combined 2 players.
Okay. But Haliburton can have a 28-point game where they don't necessarily play well because it comes down to the facilitation. Siakam can have 35-point games where, unfortunately, that's a sign that offensively they were too narrowed in or too tunneled in. If you were to look at a Pacers box score to determine whether or not they won a game or played well, you would look at it and you would say, what did Aaron Nesmith do? And when Aaron Nesmith is having games where he's scoring at an efficient level, and yes, he got 13 shots yesterday, and he was only 1 of 6 from three-point range, but the other things that he does on the floor, and he gets 16 points for them, those are 16 points that oftentimes are not, as I always talk about, going through by design for him. So when a guy like Nesmith, who is probably your 4th or 5th option offensively, is getting double-digit scoring, that is a sign that they are whipping that ball around and they're playing and every piston is firing at the same time. And I love Aaron Nesmith. If I was going to get a Pacer jersey, it would be Aaron Nesmith. Now, in terms of offensive efficiency, in terms of players clicking on all cylinders at all times, let's go to what happened after the Pacer game was completed. Pacer game ends, and then you're like, okay, now we get the nightcap. Indiana at Oregon. Preface with this, I love Dana Altman. I think he's a hell of a coach. And the best part of that game last night, if you stayed up late for it, the best part of the game was the post-game interview with Dana Altman, only because the Oregon Ducks stood in the background and was waving the entire time and having his antics. It was awesome. But Indiana last night, and I was actually thinking to myself as I was watching towards the end of the game, I thought, okay, this game here is gravy for Indiana, because if they win this game, they basically punch their ticket almost assuredly for the NCAA tournament. But because they were leading the game inside of like 6 minutes to go, I thought, either way, they can drop this game, and assuming that either they defeat Ohio State or they win a game in the Big Ten tournament, I think they're in. Because it's kind of a soft – it's the bubble itself. I don't know if you'd say it's a soft bubble, whichever way it is. But it feels like there's nobody that's really like taking charge here late in the year of those teams that are trying to get in. So I think Indiana's in pretty good shape. But in terms of offensive efficiency, Indiana did not have it at the end of that game. And I was thinking to myself, this just looks like they're just not hitting shots. They're getting good looks. They're getting open threes. They're moving the ball pretty well, but they're just not knocking down shots. And then I looked a little bit further into it and splashed cold water on my face and woke myself up. And Eddie, you pointed this out as well. They went back to what hasn't worked. And I understand why. I understand why you go with the two big combination. And by two, I mean TWO, not TOO. I understand why they went to that down the stretch, but the reality is that when they went to, as we've talked about, having two bigs on the floor at the same time, it completely shut down their offensive efficiency, and they were terrible down the stretch of that game.
Oh, yeah.
And you go from being up 1 to losing by 9 in the final few minutes of that game. Now, Oregon and Mike Woodson was fired up. Mike Woodson was fired up not about the fact that they didn't play well down the stretch, not about the fact that Malik Renew was 4 for 12 from the floor, not about the fact that Oumar Ballo, despite having 12 boards, only had 10 points. He was livid about the officiating. A lot of people were livid about the officiating in that game, right? And Mike Woodson, who typically is pretty stoic, doesn't do a lot of interviews. Do we have it, Eddie, of Mike Woodson being fired up yesterday?
Well, we do. I just don't have the censored button on it yet.
We've got to use the dump button on that, right?
We would have to if we aired it unfiltered, yes.
Okay. So can we get the uncensored, unfiltered version?
I can get it in the break, yes.
Okay. So you'll hear, because we don't normally hear Mike Woodson fired up, right?
No.
But he's fired up, and I kind of like it. Like he's trying to stand up for his guys. A lot of things with Woodson I go back to kind of relates to, okay, some of it you think to yourself, where was this earlier? Getting away from the two big lineup. When I say too big, I mean having Renew and Ballo on the floor at the same time. Everybody knew that that's something they needed to get away from, and going with those guys by rotation instead of on the floor at the same time. Things really started clicking when he went away from that. Where was that earlier? Using Anthony Leal more in terms of defensively and not worrying about him in terms of what he brings offensively to the table, but having him on the floor at all times because of his defensive ability and what he creates there. Where was that earlier? Letting guys, and maybe it just comes from knowing that like kind of the end is near. Where was that earlier? Letting his guys just play a little bit more freely. Now, setting up for critical shots down the stretch and trying to get Mackenzie Mbako open on a night when he's struggling, maybe not the best thing to do, but he is a street guy. So I get that. Now, the other side of it, what did we talk about with Purdue? With Purdue, one of the things that I've been curious about, and we'll talk about this with Jerry Palm, because I legitimately don't know this answer because it seemingly changes year to year. And that is, how much does the committee, and Purdue's in the tournament, we know that, but how much does the tournament selection committee look at the way a team is finishing or the way they've played in the last month and a half of the season? Because that's a mixed bag for Purdue. They've done a really nice job once they got into that situation where you wondered if they were taking on water because of the fact that we've talked about it. Teams started attacking Trey Kaufman-Renn. They weren't getting help defense down low. They were kind of easy to score against on the block. And they weren't getting wing scoring. The most exciting thing to happen from their wings yesterday, for example, is the fact that Miles Colvin checked into the game without checking with anybody, which is awesome, right? So Miles Colvin, early in the game, goes into the scorer's table and is like, yeah, I'm checking in for 0, CJ Cox. And Painter turns around to the assistants and is like, did you guys send in Colvin? No. We thought you did. And Colvin's like, I thought for sure somebody called my name. I just checked in the game. No harm, no foul. Pretty awesome. Colvin gives up 15 minutes on the night. But they got good shooting from Fletcher Lawyer, which when he shoots the ball like that and he knocks down 7 threes, they're going to be difficult to beat in most games. Because what have we talked about? They need something to draw away from Braden Smith and from Trey Kaufman-Renn. And Braden Smith last night was doing Braden Smith things. And I think we probably got the answer to the question of when it comes to the player of the year for Purdue, if you had to pick one, is it Braden Smith or Kaufman-Renn? I think Braden Smith's been the more consistent of the two. But a lopsided win over Rutgers. Rutgers was a team, I think, if you're a Rutgers fan, you got to be like, what in the world? Right?
You've got 2 top 5 picks, and you're losing by almost 30 and not going to make the tournament?
I mean, they've got
the NCAA tournament.
They literally do have 2 of the biggest recruits in the country on their roster, right?
Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, yeah.
I mean, thought to be literally, they're going to be what? Both of them are lottery picks, correct?
Oh, yeah, top 5 for sure.
Ace Bailey's, I mean, that dude's mega talented. But
Harper's probably going too after Cooper Flagg.
Yeah. Cooper Flagg's decent, right?
That's, of course, if Cooper Flagg decides to declare for the draft. There's been a lot of speculation lately. I don't know if you've seen this, Jake, that he could go back to Duke for another season.
Why?
I don't know. I think he enjoys playing at Duke and playing college basketball. I'm not sure.
Do you know that he has a twin, Cooper Flagg?
Yes.
Can you imagine? Cooper Flagg's twin plays at like Maine Tech, right?
I don't know if it's Maine Tech or if it's just Maine.
Is it Maine? I thought he was like at a super small school, like a Division II school. I could be wrong in that, but he's his twin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was somebody stealing all the nutrients in the womb? What's going on there? How does that happen? Like, that would be. I mean, honestly, that would be tough, man. To be a twin and have your twin brother be a basketball prodigy that is probably the biggest anticipated. When's the last time that we had a player that came into college basketball with the level of anticipation as Cooper Flagg?
Ooh, that's a good question.
You know what else is a good question? Because the reason I say that, obviously, you go back to an era where players would not have been.
Wembanyama, but he didn't play in college.
That's what I mean, entering college. Because you have players that obviously now they have to go to college.
Anthony Davis?
Anthony Davis wasn't a huge recruit in high school, though, right? Because he was a late bloomer that then once he got to Kentucky, people were like, okay, this guy's legit. Out of Chicago. I don't think he was. I think in his senior year he was a big recruit, but he wasn't. I mean, Cooper Flagg's been a stud for 4 years of high school, right?
Yeah.
And playing, higher above his grade forever. Do you know this, Eddie Garrison? Here's a fabulous trivia question for you.
Anthony Davis was a 5-star, and he was the top recruit of his class.
I know, but he wasn't. But what I'm saying is, looking like in his sophomore year, he was one of those that, like, as a sophomore, people are like, who is this guy? And then he developed, yes, and he became a big-time name. But Cooper Flagg has been on the radar since he was, like, 14 years old, is what I'm saying. LeBron James would be the last player I can remember hearing about at as young an age as I heard about Cooper Flagg, unless it was somebody that is the offspring of a megastar, and therefore they're on the radar. You know what I mean? Like Arch Manning, for example. I'm talking football here, obviously, but Arch Manning, part of why he was on the radar so much is because his name is not Arch Garrison or Arch Query, right?
That's
now,
right.
This trivia question is an awesome one. It's so good, since we have Pantera tickets to give away, maybe I should do it at some point today off this, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do it right now because I'm in a fun mood. Because it's not 5 degrees outside. And Jerry Palm going to join us in just a minute here. You ready for my trivia question of the day, Eddie? And I'll let you think about it during the entire commercial break, but you cannot Google it.
Chet Holmgren?
That's a good one. That's not the answer to the trivia question, but that's a good one. I can tell you're still thinking on the other one.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my trivia question for you. Who was the last? Now, folks, you can text me your guesses. You can, and by the way, Eddie did get it right. Aaron Neesmith was the correct answer on the initials that you wrote down. Yes, it took you forever to get that, but you did get it right.
Well, I initially wrote AB. I was going to put Aaron or AS, Andrew Shepard.
Andrew, So
Yeah.
Andrew Nimhart and Ben Shepherd
Yes.
combo? No, it's
Yeah.
Aaron Nesmith.
I know.
Okay. Here's the trivia question of the day. If you think you know the correct answer, you cannot look it up. But text me, and whoever gets the first person to send me the correct answer, I will immediately give you props on the air here. And my cell phone number, as most people know, is 317-523-9288. 317-523-9288. You cannot look up the answer. You have to go with your gut instinct and send me your guess. Who was the last NBA number 1 overall draft pick that played 4 years of college?
Oh, Denary just chimed in. He texted me Zion.
Zion Williamson's a good one.
Yeah.
And now hold on. But we've got two things going here.
I know.
You're talking about in terms of players that were anticipated throughout the course of their high school career.
Yeah.
Zion Williamson, because of the warm-ups of him, that is correct. He had a lot of anticipation. But in terms of the last player to be taken number 1 overall in the NBA draft that played 4 years of college and most likely will be the final ever player to make that claim, who was it? I'll tell you the answer, and Jerry Palm will join us to talk NCAA tournament bubble. He'll do it next. Fabulous guesses on my trivia question. Who was the last college four-year player selected number one overall in the NBA draft? And most likely probably will be still for a very long time the final player ever to accomplish that feat. Now, before I give the answer, we'll bring in Jerry Palm, of course, from CBS Sports and his Bracketology to discuss the NCAA tournament. I don't want to put him in a bad spot here, but I'm going to anyway. Jerry, do you happen to know the answer to my fabulous trivia question, which is my favorite trivia question of all time?
The last four-year senior. Well, I mean, gosh. Kenyon Martin?
Ring it up! Ring it up! Kenyon Martin is indeed the correct answer. And would you agree?
You know, and what's funny about that is his college career ended with a severe injury.
Correct.
And then he was still the number one overall pick.
Okay, let's get to this, which you make a good point about his injury, okay? And in college football, we have seen this become a factor. If there is a team, because I remember that year that being a big deal with Cincinnati, and I know that these things change, Jerry. It's fluid from one year to the next sometimes in terms of what is alleged the priority amongst the committee. Right now, if there is a team that when the committee is looking at their body of work and they either have a marquee player who has just gone down or a marquee player that missed significant time and is now back, are those things factored in?
Yes. Yeah, but the thing you have to consider is the games still count. The results still count. So there's a little context involved, but they're not going to pretend results didn't happen or different results would have happened. They can't do that. And they didn't even do it then, really. Back then, Cincinnati was the number one team in the country. They lost to the National Player of the Year for the season with an injury. And instead of being the number one overall team, they were a 2, which, isn't really saying, well, obviously they wouldn't have won any of these games without him, but really just an acknowledgement that, this is a team that has still had a really good season, but they're not really the best team anymore. And hopefully we don't have anything like that happen, like Janai Broom or Cooper Flagg going down in a conference tournament. And, I would hate for something like that to happen.
I'm looking for wood here, Jerry. Hang on. Okay. There, yeah. I knocked on wood for you just to make sure you're safe. Okay. We're covered.
Yeah. So anyways, it's, but those are dramatic examples. Probably a more recent one that would resonate with people in our area, because I'm from Indiana as well, is Robbie Hummel. Robbie Hummel got hurt the first time in late February at Minnesota on a Purdue team that was on its way to a number one seed and, one of the favorites to win a national title. Well, they did manage to wrap up the Big Ten championship still, but you could tell they weren't the same team. And, Purdue's resume at the end of the season probably indicated a 3 seed, and they ended up being a 4. And so, that's another case where, a very impactful player, not Kenyon Martin level, but still a pretty impactful player, hurt a team to the point where they weren't seated where you would have thought they would have been, even with how they performed afterwards.
Okay, that segues into the topic of 2025. And by the way, Jay Dyson also knew Kenyon Martin. Congratulations, Jay Dyson. He was the first to text me with a correct guess on that. Okay, you have Purdue right now, Jerry. I find this interesting because I think it's a slot higher than I've seen a lot of people prognosticating, although I'm not saying it's unwarranted on their resume. You have Purdue right now as a 3 seed. They obviously have rebounded a little bit from that slide that they went on, and they've come back with 2 good wins here with UCLA at home and then the resounding nature by which they beat Rutgers. How solid do you believe them to be a 3, and what is the biggest merit they have going for them that puts them on that 3 line as opposed to, say, a 4 or 5?
So, I mean, they're my number 12 team overall, so that's the last 3. So, take that for what it's worth in terms of how solid it is. And, they could go up, too. They can go up, they can go down. There's a lot of games left to be played amongst the teams in that part of the bracket, especially when conference tournaments get involved. The thing that Purdue has going for it is a very strong schedule, both in conference and out, quality wins, both in conference and out. Their only loss that really kind of hurt them is, I suppose, their worst loss, at least in terms of quadrants, is home Ohio State, which was, after their West Coast trip. And then The one at Penn State back in December was really pretty much a disaster. That was their worst performance, in the second half of Indiana. But Indiana may be a tournament team. So, but just the strength of schedule, the depth and quality of Purdue's wins is why they are in that part of the bracket. But really, one team jumps them and there are four, and that wouldn't be unfair either.
Jerry, I've always been confused by this, and perhaps you can kind of shed some light on it. Jerry Palmer, our guest from CBS Sports, talking college basketball bracketology, the NCAA tournament. When it comes to, for any team, a quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4 win, if you could, for our listeners who are not as familiar or don't follow it on the daily, can you explain how those quads are determined? And then I've got a follow-up about it. But let's begin with the elementary level of it. Quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4.
Okay, so they've always had, by the way, 4 buckets to put games in. I've been doing this 30 years. The whole time they've had 4 buckets to put games in. But until they started dividing it by home, road, and neutral, they didn't need to use the term quadrant. So quad 1 games are home games against teams ranked in the top 30, neutral top 50, road games top 75. So quad 2, home games 31 to 75, neutral 51 to 100, road games 76 to 135. So they're all like that. So you've got, a bigger group of teams you can play on the road. You get a higher credit for it. I mean, it's acknowledging the fact that it's a lot harder to win on the road than it is at home. So those are the top 2. You want the others as well?
Well, no. So that makes sense then, right? I mean, obviously, you start getting into the 3s and the 4s, and I'm not going to say it's not as relevant, right. But okay.
No, but those, you're right though. Those games are not as important unless you lose them.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say you lose one, it's a big demerit, right? Now, here's the thing, Jerry, that I've always been confused by. Okay, let's go back to a November win over a top 10 team. You think, oh, goody, this is huge. Then that team, the bottom completely falls out, and they drastically slide. When the tournament committee is looking at it, are they going by where that team was slotted at the time you played them or in totality in March?
Okay, so the interesting thing about that is you're talking about AP rankings, right? The polls.
Well, whatever however the
because the net isn't even available then.
Okay.
Right? Like when Purdue beat Alabama at the beginning of the year, Alabama was ranked wherever they were ranked. The committee doesn't care. Game time rankings are not a thing.
Well, but what I'm saying is, so if that's
not even in their own system,
if that's listed as a quad 1 win, it
is.
Okay. What I'm saying is, if it's listed as a quad 1 win, that's because of where Alabama is slotted now.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So if a team tanks, they'll slide down. And who they were when you played them. I mean, unless there's a roster issue. Then there's that, like we talked about, there's some context in that. But if it's just the team that got better, then you're benefiting from it.
Okay, so Jerry, what we're getting at is whoever you're a fan of, okay? I mean, you're a fan of Utah Valley, okay? Whoever Utah Valley beats, let's say outside of conference, you should be a fan of that team for the rest of the year, right? Because you want them upholding their end of the bargain to validate your effort, correct?
Not only that, you should just root for all your non-conference foes because you want your losses to look as good as possible too.
Right. Okay. Fair. Now let's get to Indiana. You've got them right now, I believe, as a 10. Everybody and their brother seems to think they're going to play against St. Mary's. I realize that that's just kind of the way the rankings of the numbers that you have them fall out with that. But you have Indiana as a 10.
I couldn't even have told you that without looking.
Do you think Indiana last night, because they were not blown off the floor or embarrassed with Oregon, was the result of that game, assuming they beat Ohio State, relatively irrelevant in the grand scheme?
The result of the Oregon game is irrelevant?
In other words, because it was a not an embarrassing loss to Oregon, assuming they beat Ohio State, was the fact that they lost to Oregon versus beat Oregon negligible in their overall? Are they still in safely the field, obviously?
I don't think they're in safely at all. They're still on the bubble. I mean, they can still play their way out. If they continue to play the way they have lately, then they probably won't play themselves out. You never know what you're going to get from Ohio State, though. I mean, that team is just hard to predict what you're going to get from Ohio State. They've got talent. They just don't always put it together. Actually, you could say that about Indiana for most of the season, but lately they seem to have put it together and are playing very well here the last couple of weeks. So, and well enough to maybe push themselves into the field. But Ohio State's trying to do that, but that's an interesting game. But a home loss to Ohio State and an early exit to somebody who's probably hurts you in the Big Ten tournament, and Indiana's going to be pretty squarely on the bubble again. So
is it possible? Is it safe to
do.
say that Indiana, Ohio State, assuming that neither of these two teams catches fire and wins, 4 games, and they may in the Big Ten tournament, okay? But Indiana, Ohio State, as it is right now, to conclude the Big Ten season for each team in Bloomington, safe to say that has potential to be a two of them vying for one spot situation.
Not necessarily. I mean, it could, but I wouldn't say that has to be the case.
So if Indiana loses to Ohio State, you think they can still get in?
Yes, and vice versa.
Gotcha. Okay.
The loser still has a chance.
Okay.
I mean, the conference tournament is however many games you continue to play. Big Ten's got some good teams. Other teams around the country are playing as well, and that what those teams do could impact you. You might think you're in the field, and then, Colorado State wins the Mountain West, and instead of knocking out a Mountain West team, knocks out Indiana or Ohio State or whoever. So, even when you think you're safe, you're not always safe.
Okay, rapid fire on these last 3, Jerry. So we're going gut instant, like the first team that pops into your head. You ready?
Okay.
Number 1, the team that may not be, in terms of their seeding right now, one that jumps out at you, but they're playing really, really good basketball, and you would be really worried if you draw them in the first round because they are playing. They're on a heater right now. That'd be who?
BYU.
Okay.
My goodness.
Okay.
We saw them in Cincinnati the last time they lost. That was 7 games ago, and they were terrible, especially in the second half. But since then, they've beaten Kansas. They've beaten Arizona. They are on a heater, as you said. That is a dangerous team right now, and if they continue to play like this, they may not get seeded because of the whole season counts, where they're playing at the moment. But it's that's a team I don't think I'd want to see right now.
Okay, team that has a really good seed because they've just stockpiled really good wins, but at the same time, they've shown a little bit of susceptibility because they have a higher number of questionable losses than most would expect.
Boy, I don't know. Kansas? Are they high enough in the bracket, or do you need someone higher?
No, Kansas is good because for a long time, for the last until 7 weeks ago, they looked like they were a surefire. You know what I mean?
Well, they were the preseason number 1.
Right. Yeah.
And North Carolina a couple of years ago was the first preseason number 1 to miss the tournament entirely. I don't think Kansas has to worry about that. But BYU, speaking of which, beat them by 34 a couple of weeks ago. That is the worst loss ever handed to a preseason number 1 team. So, Kansas they're something like 7-7 in their last 14 games, and they're just kind of hit and miss, and it's a team that should be better than they are, but for whatever reason, they're not.
Okay, last one, and you can't say Indiana, Kansas, BYU, for example. Okay, so of teams we've not mentioned. The biggest Jekyll and Hyde team that Jerry Palm looks at their resume and goes, would you guys figure out who you are, please? Because I cannot grasp who you are.
Oh, my gosh. That's nearly every team on the bubble. Seriously.
Yeah. And there's a ton on the bubble, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. I've just got like a dozen teams or so still on the bubble. It's crazy. It's like the SEC. The bubble teams in the SEC, the 3 primary ones, but there's really 4: Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas. They'll win one game and you think, gosh, these guys are doing great, and then they'll lose a couple and you wonder if they even know which end of the basketball is up.
Right. Right.
Oh, wait a minute, that's the round thing. Never mind. But then like Texas. Texas had 2 just miserable games. They lost to South Carolina. They lost at home, I think, to Arkansas. And they looked dead. They looked like they were ready for the season to end. And then last night they go out and win at Mississippi State. Make up your mind. So just about every team on the bubble is like that. Just about. Because Indiana's a little different because they've kind of played their way, in. But most of the teams that are right around the cut line that's pretty much every week. Win one, lose one. Win one, lose one.
Well, Jerry, we usually say this to people, of course, towards the end of the calendar year, but in your case, I can say it towards the beginning of the March, and that is happy holidays to you. Enjoy it over the next couple of weeks. I know you're busy. Certainly appreciate the time. Look forward to having you on again. And congratulations on the trivia question.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Jerry Palm joining us from CBS. Interesting stuff and really good stuff there. And I'm telling you, Arkansas is the one team I would not want to see just because Calipari teams this time of year typically can just flip that switch. All right, NFL free agency. There's one guy for the Colts that might be getting paid. Is it going to be from Indianapolis? We'll tell you who that is, and we'll talk more about it top of the hour next. Let me give a little advice to all guys out there. When this song, I was like, Eddie, just slightly younger than you when, this song was, came out like the year I was born, but
Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith?
yes, fabulous song. And there's a line in it when I was just getting ready to try to really get my career going and just had it in mind that I would go basically anywhere there was a job offer for me.
You got it going?
Well, I'm still waiting on that. But I literally just had this vision of I'm going to go be, working television sports wherever I have to go. Bozeman, Montana, Flagstaff, Arizona, Yuma, Arizona, wherever. If there's a job and they are interested in me, I'm going to go. And I was dating a girl at the time, and this song was playing on the radio, and I said to her, I go, oh, this perfectly describes exactly where my life is right now. And she said, what do you mean? Thinking that like it was some, and then I sang out loud the part where I said, can't say, baby, where I'll be in a year. And she looked at me and was like, well, I guess that tells. So I would not suggest saying that to a significant other. Everything worked out in the end just fine for all of us.
I would hope so that you would say that.
She's still a dear friend, and obviously, it worked out well for me. Right?
Did it?
Yes. I've done okay.
Yeah, Emily Longnecker.
No.
Wonderful wife, right?
That is not the case. That would be Shannon, thank you. Although, for some reason, the interwebs thinks it's Emily. Okay, speaking of not knowing where you're going to be in a year, NFL free agency, there is one player that the headlines on NFL.com say is about to get paid upwards of $20 million a year. Does that mean the Colts are going to pony up that kind of cash? Eric Edholm, NFL.com, will join us, and we will discuss that and more next. Rolling along on a Hump Day Wednesday, Jake Query along with Eddie Garrison, Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. If you were to go to NFL.com and read their free agency discussion, one player that they believe could be considered the best value or even perhaps one of the most promising young talents at their position would be none other than Dayo Odeyingbo from the Indianapolis Colts that they think could fetch up to $20 million per year. There are a number of, pass rush guys that are in this particular class, but his age makes him particularly intriguing, I think. And if he were to get, let's say, 16 to 20 million a year, question is, do the Indianapolis Colts jump on that? And if they did, and they decided that they wanted to try to replenish that stock somewhere in the draft, is that a position where there are players that can be obtained in the, say, like he was, non-first round, that can be contributors? Joining us now on the always busy and available for your company now to sponsor guest line is Eric Edholm from the NFL Network, a repeat customer on the show, or say contributor to the show. Eric, we'll begin with this coming off the Combine. From the national perspective, the overwhelming storyline or buzz at this Combine versus past years would be what?
Yeah, I think there were a few things. I mean, obviously the fact that we didn't get to see any of the top, or not any, I shouldn't say any of the top quarterbacks, but the presumed top two, although I guess part of that storyline is the fact that, Shedeur Sanders' landing spot isn't clear now. I think there are a handful of teams that like him better than others. That's in the end all that matters, but being the top 5, 6, top 10 pick that some people kind of forecasted for him, I don't know that that's the case. I think you could see him go later in round 1. I think you could even see him go high in round 2, like a Will Levis a couple years ago when he slipped out of the first round. I'd also say the defensive line talent was on full display. I think that's the strongest position if we lump the tackles and the edges together. But even if we don't, I think individually those two hold up very well. And running backs and tight ends on offense, I would say, are the ones that the positions that kind of have people a little bit more excited than others this year.
If you were to list by position, not necessarily at the top, Eric, the positions that have the best talent up top, but the ones that have the deepest depth of it, 1 through, say, 20. In other words, where you can get a really good player mid-round in this particular draft. I guess give me both sides of that. The one that you would be in trouble if you're hoping to get one in the 5th round, let's say, and the one where you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I would say offensive line, especially offensive tackle. That's not a position where I feel like I would have the luxury of waiting if I was a general manager, especially because this is the time of year where the coaches get involved in the process too, and some of them are looking for more specific body types, and this is a class where there's a lot of tackle guard tweeners. You have Will Campbell with unusually short arms and short wingspan. How does he project? Is he a left tackle? Is he an interior guy? Some like center for him. Armand Membu, not your typical offensive tackle dimensions. But again, these are good players. I'm just saying, we're already nitpicking with the top couple guys, and I think there's a trickle-down effect there as well. But edge rusher, boy, I mean, I don't know how many will end up in my top 100. I'm working on that list right now, but I'll get back to you. It's going to be a pretty high number, and I think it could end up being, north of a dozen or 15 or so, which is, a very high percentage of the top prospects. So I think that depth is going to last into day 3. Again, not spectacular starting level talents from day 1 necessarily, but useful players in the Dayo Odeyingbo mold, I guess, if you will. Somebody who, came in with a lot of intrigue, but wasn't necessarily a complete product right away. So there's a lot of those types of guys, but, instead of 2nd round, maybe you can get that type of player in round 3 or 4.
The Colts, as you look at it, Eric Edholm is our guest from NFL.com. You slot the Colts, you do power rankings over the course of the year. We've got a pretty good idea because the season's over. You can simply look at the standings and go, Jake, you're a moron. There's,
Right.
But having said that, in terms of where you anticipate of teams that are around where Indianapolis is, do the Colts seem to have the most holes, the same number of holes, or are they closer than most of their contemporaries in getting to the next level, if what I'm saying makes sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, right? If you look at the teams, obviously Dallas and San Francisco picking right ahead of them, Miami too. I think you could argue, all three of those teams were disappointments a year ago. I think people had a little bit higher expectations depending on who you ask. And, the teams that are picking right after them, let's see, 15 would be Falcons, 16 Cardinals, 17 Bengals. Bengals would probably fit in that same underachiever category. So, there's at least a case to be made that those four teams that I just mentioned are, if not a little stronger top to bottom or have a little bit more star power perhaps. But, you even look at the Bears even with a potential star in Caleb Williams at number 10, they're still filling out holes. They're busy making their offensive line better. So, they have a lot of work to do. The Seahawks, the Cardinals, the Falcons, I think those are all teams too that, while the Cardinals have Murray and some ascending talents, Marvin Harrison, I don't know that they're a complete picture either. All of them have some questions on defense, certainly. So, I would say they're right in the same neighborhood, which is, again, what you probably expect based on the standings and the fact that we don't have any first-round picks traded this year, all owned by their original clubs, which hasn't happened in a long time. So it is a good way to do the apples-to-apples comparison, I guess.
Eric, the big position in Indianapolis that people are going to be talking about is tight end. I mean, it is so glaringly obvious that the Colts need at the very least, a receiving or a play-after-catch tight end. Now, there are two right out of the Big Ten, kind of in our backyard here in Indianapolis, that are going to be in that realm. Tyler Warren, of course, of Penn State, and then Colston Loveland of Michigan. You see how big a drop-off between those two players coming into the draft?
I don't see a massive difference. Now, there's a health question with Loveland. He was telling us at the combine about his elbow or his shoulder surgery and how he's expected to be cleared for the start of camp. But that's a 6-month recovery period. He had surgery in January. So, we're looking at mid to late July before he's going to be cleared for action. Again, that's for a team that may have a little bit of urgency. That's a little concerning. But, again, the player is fantastic. I sort of compare him a little bit to Dalton Kincaid, who came out a few years ago, a little bit longer, a little bit maybe burstier, I would say, up front. Warren's a thicker guy, maybe a little bit more versatile. You can use him in the backfield. You can use him under center, too. That's kind of a fun thing that they really exploited a lot at Penn State. I know tight ends under center is all the rage these days, so I'm sure that'll help him out. But maybe just a little bit more explosive player and a tiny bit more versatile. So, again, depending on what your needs are offensively, both guys give a really good effort blocking, too. I don't know that either one of them's a finished product in that regard, but they definitely are coachable, and I think, could end up being very good. Warren also has the extra year of experience, but some people may look at on the flip side and say, Colston Loveland, if he came out a year from now, maybe he's the fifth pick in the draft instead of somewhere in the teens. So, there's different ways to look at it, but I don't know that there's a massive gap between those two guys. Health probably being one factor that can separate them at least now, at this moment.
Okay, Eric, I'm going to give you a hypothetical here, okay? You're sitting around during the NFL draft. You're watching, and where is the draft this year? Is it in Green Bay? Is that right? Okay.
Green Bay.
So you're watching the NFL draft coverage, and you're trying to figure out if whether or not it is accurate that 2.5 million people are in Green Bay, as they're saying on television. And so you're watching it, and then the phone rings, and you look down, and you're like, 317 number. It's that idiot from the radio show again, and you pick it up, and it's Chris Ballard, and he says, "Eric, Chris Ballard here. Listen, I'm torn. I haven't slept in weeks on this. I've got the 14th pick, and then, of course, I've got a second-round pick. Mm-hmm. I need tight end, and I need defensive backfield help. I need you, Eric Edholm, to tell me which of those two positions I need to prioritize at 14 because the drop-off is greater in round 2 if I've got to go with the second or third guy on the board in the second round as opposed to round 1. You would advise him to go which?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, if you just sort of do the math and, there are more starting defensive backs on the field, typically 5 or more, right? I mean, 4 in base defense, but most teams have at least 5 out there, more than 50% of the time. So, defensive back is the higher priority position in terms of football impact. I'm not saying a Hall of Fame tight end or a Pro Bowl tight end can't change the makeup of your offense, right? But I also feel like you can get, Elijah Arroyo from Miami in round 2. You can probably get Gunnar Helm and Terrence Ferguson and Harold Fannin. These are good players. I don't know that they're ever going to be superstars, but they, I think, can add to a receiving game on day 2, So defensive backs, I don't know that there are those. I think there will be options for them at 14. I really do. I mean, that's going to be the interesting part, is seeing, is the right safety there? Is the right corner there? Is there somebody who can do both things? Jahdae Barron, I would say from Texas, is kind of an intriguing guy in the Brian Branch mold, if you will. Remember, Branch went mid-second round, which is crazy to think because he's such an impact guy for the Lions, and size and sort of being pigeonholed as a nickel really hurt him. But, Barron's a really good player. Will Johnson, the fact that he didn't test in Indy, has some injury questions. You're probably talking about a top 10 player in most drafts, but without that key information, if he's not able to do it prior, during Michigan's pro day or workouts or things like that, he could be there with the 14th pick. So I'd always advise to take the highest rated player at that position of need with the first rounder. You also want to be able to lay one up in the middle of the fairway too, because, your first round pick, you're counting on them to do something. Maybe they're not a star, but they're a very serviceable player. A lot of GMs will take that, especially when they're in that position. Like, we got to win now. We have to have a better football team next year than we have right now. So, if an impact DB can get on the field right away, I would probably propose that. I also think there's a good chance that at least one of those top 2 tight ends won't be available when they're picking at 14.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you about a local guy, because I think it was of intrigue, because we later found out that he played the majority of the season, almost the entire season, if not all of it, injured, in Curtis Rourke of Indiana. And, I thought it was interesting at the Combine when he said, imagine what I can do if I'm healthy. Are teams going to be intrigued by that? You see him kind of slotting where? Yeah,
late because of the age and the injury, but there's no doubt he helped himself last year, and I think kind of rekindled his stock a little bit, and maybe a little bit of a forgotten guy in the draft picture. So, the fact that he showed that toughness and went through the season knowing how special a season it was and how important he was to the success of the team, it just kind of gives you an extra little gold star there. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean in a very praiseworthy way. And, intelligence, understanding ball placement and defensive rotations and things like that. I would think, I was talking to Eric Galko, who runs the East-West Shrine Game, and had him down there for interviews and just his presence. So it was kind of, his conversations with him. I know he was, very, very impressed, almost blown away by kind of the command that he sort of possessed. So the easy story to root for, especially in a quarterback class that has a lot of wild cards. Could Quinn Ewers become a Pro Bowl QB? Sure, but he may not make my top 100. That's kind of where we're at. It's the overall class, even with the kind of the big name guys, it's a bit of a mixed bag right now. So I think there are, Tyler Shuck and Curtis Rourke and Brady Cook and Max Brosmer. You're going to see, I think, a slew of these guys go off the board 6th, 7th round, and a few of them are going to be undrafted just because of the nature of the draft, the limited number of picks teams have. But I would think one of those 4 guys has a real good chance to make it, at least one. And, if you're patient with him, he could end up being a really good backup for a long time.
Eric, best and worst things about the Combine being in Indianapolis from a media guy's perspective or gal's perspective?
I love the layout. I love the layout of the city. It's easy to navigate. There's a tempo to the week. You kind of know where to go and where to look for people and things like that, and where to meet up. And obviously, if you're in one of those hotels downtown, I was lucky enough to stay at the Westin this year, and I don't have to go outside, right? We're hardy people. We're Midwesterners. We can handle a little cold weather, but given the choice to walk through the little tunnel there, the the overhead thing there, I'll take it every time. But worst part, I feel like I've been going to the same restaurants and bars for 20 years now.
Yeah.
I could use a little new blood, but I understand. I really like Indy and have always had good times there.
You know, actually, I thought you were going to say the coolest thing about being here is you get to run into guys that were in Hoosiers.
That was a cool thing. It was funny, too. I just, like, the car was being brought down, and this guy just started talking to him, and he's like, oh, yeah, I was number 34 on South Bend Central. Like, I might have to go watch that tonight. So I haven't gotten to do it yet, but I did see somebody attached a clip to that tweet.
Well, hold on. Surely you've seen the movie before, right?
Oh, I mean, 100 times?
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
And
I grew
listen,
up,
that would have been right around the time that, I hate to say it this way, but that Gene Hackman passed, right? That we lost Gene Hackman. I mean, it was kind of, it was certainly a relevant topic around that time,
that's
right?
what I said to him. I said, this has to be a weird week for you. And he went on for 2 or 3 minutes about how nice Hackman was and how he, talked to all the, the quote unquote little people on the set and things like that. So, yeah, it was, he seemed a little kind of shook by the news that has been trickling out of, his passing and stuff like that. So, yeah, we definitely talked about that. And you never know who you're going to meet in Indy. But, yeah, I'm a Gene Hackman guy, too. So sad week for sure.
And let's be real here, Eric. The spirit of having time for and talking to the little people is the exact reason why you actually are willing to come on this radio show. And we're thankful for it, right?
I'm the little people. Are you kidding
Hardly.
me? Yeah, no, I always enjoy coming on with you guys. When you first sort of challenged me, that was a good sign. Like, we made it through the first time, and I think all parties were happy with the results. So that was a good test of international diplomacy,
That's
I
right.
guess.
Of course, as always. Eric, we appreciate the time, as always, and we'll certainly be looking for your coverage throughout the upcoming free agency and then the power rankings and everything that comes with it. Look forward to talking to you again.
Can't wait. See you, man. Thank
All
you.
right, Eric Edholm joining us from NFL.com. Again, in terms of free agency and players that are speculated to be those that – and this happens sometimes. Sometimes you get players that just strictly come out at the right time in the right year. And there may be players that look at it. I'll go back to the Lance Stevenson situation. And I know that when Lance Stevenson left Indiana for the Hornets, people thought he was crazy. Well, I mean, people always thought he was a little bit off in general. I say that lovingly. But if you remember, Stevenson was offered a higher salary and 5 years for the Pacers. And he took less money and 4 years to go to the Hornets. And it seemed ludicrous. But it was actually very strategic. Now, he gambled and lost on it, admittedly. But what Stevenson did was his representation looked at it and said, look, the new collective bargaining agreement cycle is going to happen. In 4 years, there's going to be a new CBA, meaning the salary cap is going to skyrocket. And the salaries, because that happens like every 4 years in the NBA, where all of a sudden you look at it and you're saying, wait, hold on. Othello Harrington just got $25 million a year. Like, what in the world? And players benefit from that 1 year where all of a sudden teams have to make the salary floor and the salary cap goes up so much because the new television money comes in under the collective bargaining agreement that every player aspires to be a free agent in a particular given year. And in Lance Stevenson's case, the Pacers wanted to lock him in for 5 years, which means his contract would have come up a year past when that window was there. And everybody was lining up for, and I want to say it was 2020 maybe. And so they're saying, look, you want to be a free agent in 2020, not in 21. So he took the lesser money in the gamble for that.
Had something to do with the collective bargaining agreement, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. The new CBA
yeah.
came up at that point. So in the NFL, there are certain players that when you look at it, you may say, Dio, for example, there might be other players that are, let's say, better players at their position. Ryan Kelly may slot as a better center than does Dio at defensive, tackle. But one is 25, the other is over 30, and it just may be that this is a year from a free agency standpoint where pass rush is more in demand than other situations and other things. So for that reason, there might be a team that overpays him because of the scarcity of what he provides in this free agent class, and the timing is right for him, and he ends up with, say, $20 million. Do the Colts let him walk? Have they seen enough from other young players they have in the depth of their defensive line to allow that to happen?
My theory here, or not really a theory, is a question to you, Jake, is if you put True Serum and Chris Ballard, do you think he would regret giving Kwity Paye that fifth-year option because it means they are not able to re-sign Dio Adengbo?
That's a really good question because in my opinion here, the production of both has been, I think, pretty similar. Right? Kwity Paye has been, I'm going to go back to, and I know that I default to this explanation a lot, but I've always felt like sometimes the production of a player you have to look at in a vacuum as opposed to comparing it to where and how they were acquired. And I think that Dio and Kwity Paye have both had pretty equal production of one another, but because Paye was a first-round pick, you automatically assume because he was the first player taken in his particular year by the Colts, you assume that means that he's going to be Dwight Freeney as opposed to a solid rotational piece. I think Paye has shown himself now to be a solid rotational piece. But yes, based on, I think Dio has shown more consistency.
And availability. He hasn't missed a game yet in his career, I don't think.
Which is interesting because you're talking about Dio, right?
Yes.
Because he came in, of course, and came off of he missed the first year, right? Because wasn't he drafted and then he had the ankle injury?
He was coming off the Achilles.
Or Achilles injury, where he'd missed in college, right?
Yeah.
And I want to say that they waited on him to get healthy. I could be wrong in that. But I think, to answer your question, Eddie, I don't think he has regrets on it because I think they will be able to retain him. It's just going to cost them. And then it just depends on whether or not they want to then allow others to walk.
But yeah,
You know
once he was activated, played in 10 games for the Colts his rookie year, 17.
Now, another guy, I'll tell you one that is kind of hanging in the balance for them. That's really interesting that we talked a ton about. We talked a ton about this guy over the course of the season. And now that we're into free agency, we haven't talked as much about him.
I know who you're talking about.
I'll tell you who it is next. Eddie just bringing the heat with the music, man.
You know, this is a song I could vibe to if I was in Colorado or in Seattle or Las Vegas.
You got a head full of zombie, is that right?
Uh-huh.
Fair enough. Great song. Pantera tickets to give away. We will do that between now and the end of the show. We'll talk a little Indiana round ball with a new guest to the program that we incorporated, last week or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago, yeah.
Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald Times. Used to be the Bloomington Herald telephone, but we're going to get him on the telephone and have him on the program here coming up about 30 minutes from now.
The Bloomington Herald telephone?
That's what it was back in the day.
Interesting.
Back in the Bob Hamill days, yeah. They used to just phone it in all the time. But he did a good job, right? Yeah, the Bloomington Herald Times was the Bloomington Herald telephone. I don't know when they made that change.
So is it like the weather phone? Where
2222222?
Yeah.
You know, before we get to the Colts free agency thing, I will tell you this. I had a job one summer as a telemarketer. Myself and a bunch of buddies from high school, they were paying $6.75 an hour, which in 1990 was righteous bucks. And so we worked for this fairly shady fly-by-night mortgage company. I won't say the name of the company. It's no longer around. And, our job was to call. We had everybody's mortgage information, and we had to call them on the phone during dinner hour. And needless to say, after the second day or whatever, we're like, this is the worst job ever because everybody just hung up on us. And then we started calling our own phone numbers in different area codes just to see, to talk to other people. Like, hey, what's going on? So you live in North Dakota and you have the same phone number as me. And people are like, yeah, whatever. Then that got old, so then we started calling our phone number in different countries. And this is what happens when you have a bunch of 16-year-olds making phone calls to try to support your business. Statute of limitations is up here. And I ended up becoming lifelong not best friends, but very close friends with the people who had the telephone number that we called in London, and became pen pals with them. And then when Shannon and I went to London, we met them for the first time in person after 35 years of correspondence. It was awesome. But at the end of the summer, when all of us were relieved of our duties, they brought in the phone records and they said that somebody in booth 16, in bay 16, called the time and temperature 68 times in 1 hour on our telemarketing job. Well, I have no idea who that is. But I knew every single little ad that used to run before they would give you the downtown temperature every single time. All right, Colts free agency. We talked about Dio. There is one guy that it seemed like over the course of the year we talked an awful lot about this player, and I wonder if this player is not actually the NFL equivalent of my 2025 guy.
Oh.
There are certain players that you look at them and you say, and you look at the numbers and you go, wow, this guy's a monster. And then people that know the game better than you, that have worked in it, that have been around it, that have studied it, that have looked at film, say, I'm not saying that guy's not a good player, but he is somewhat a product of the system, and those numbers are numbers that, while it's impressive that he has accumulated them, it is entirely possible that whoever you put in that position, they're going to accumulate those numbers because of the way the defense is facilitated kind of towards them to be able to accumulate tackles. And I like this guy, but while he is a good player, he also at times makes very immature plays. Do you bring back E.J. Speed, or is E.J. Speed one that because of his numbers that he was able to tabulate is going to get on the free agency market more money from another franchise than what the Colts are going to be able to know of his value because they've seen it esoterically up close?
I'm interested to see how the linebacker free agency pans out because it is a very, very saturated market. You've got Dre Greenlaw, formerly with the San Francisco 49ers, Nick Bolton. He's another free agent. Of course, you have E.J. Speed. There are a handful of linebackers that are out there, and it'll be fascinating to see what the market dictates for how much those guys get paid because I think E.J. Speed's a good player in the right system, but I also think there were some flaws with EJ that came to surface last year in a contract year. Like you noticed him missing a lot more tackles.
Right.
He struggled a little bit more in coverage.
Another guy that's kind of that same thing, Eddie, where I think he's been a good player, but even though this year I think he was pretty durable, but historically speaking, the reliability has been of question, but he's just 27 years old still. It's Julian Blackmon. And I like Julian Blackmon. I like him. But I don't know, again, depending on what the market dictates, do you bring him back?
I mean, the injuries history it's no secret. I mean, he played last year through a shoulder injury and largely had to do that because of the lack of depth behind him. And it affected his play. Like, it's going to cost him some dollars this year. And if you go back to last year, Jake, if you look at his free agency, he wasn't signed by the Colts until it wasn't until after the draft, so it was well into April. Like, his free agency lingered for a long time, and there wasn't a decision made there until late into the offseason. I guess still early in the offseason, but late into free agency.
Now, one last player.
And I think it'll be interesting, too, to see what kind of safety Lou Anarumo wants, because typically he likes the guys that are incredibly cerebral and they have a lot of experience. Does Julian Blackmon fit the bill?
Now, tight end position, you got Kylan Granson, Mo Alley Cox both. Seemingly you could do one, let the other walk if you wanted to go in that direction, unless they feel like, Ogletree or one of the others they could roll with, and they need to obviously draft one, because I think they are going to hopefully draft one. Now, a guy that I think I would love to see them re-sign, and I would even go so far as to say prioritize. I don't mean prioritize you get in a bidding war with him, but just get it over with before he really hits the market. I don't think many people are going to actively pursue this guy. But you know who I think has been a good player for them and is a valuable piece because of the fact that he can help them in a couple of different ways and is going to be not going to cost you a lot? I mean, you're going to get him for, I don't know, probably $4.5 million a year.
Rigoberto Sanchez?
I love Sanchez. Ashton Dulin.
Yes.
I think he's a valuable piece. Now, speaking of Ashton Dulin in the position that he plays, Eddie, do you have the breaking news sounder? A guy that's been a marquee name in the NFL at his position, as a matter of fact, his name and his physique might actually be bigger than his production, is wanting out, correct?
Yeah, DK Metcalf, allegedly 27 years old, has requested a trade from the Seattle Seahawks. And, Jake, this is a very fascinating discussion, I think, now. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, when we first started doing the show, I lied the idea to you and Jimmy about, do teams go away from paying wide receivers with how deep each class is and how easy it is to replace these guys? You see San Francisco trade Deebo Samuel. You see Brandon Ayuk now allegedly available for San Francisco. You see DK Metcalf request to trade. Devontae Adams gets cut. You see how long it took the Dallas Cowboys and CeeDee Lamb to come to a contract extension. You see the same thing with Justin Jefferson. You're seeing it play out right now in Cincinnati with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Are teams going to start doing this situation now where they pay one guy superstar level because he is a superstar, and they just keep rotating the door next to that second or as a second receiver?
Is receiver the new running back in the form that you get a guy on a rookie deal, you get everything you can out of that, and then maybe you sign him to deal 2 for a couple of years? But because I think teams get worried about receiver is the hardest position, Eddie, to determine when a guy falls off a cliff. Because when they fall off the cliff, they fall off big time.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Reggie Wayne is a guy that gets a ton of credit and is kind of the exception because Reggie Wayne reinvented himself. He went from behind the defense receiver to really reliable, almost slot-type receiver. I mean, he was a possession receiver in his later years and was really, really good at it. But a lot of guys, you see it. Andre Johnson. I mean, when Andre Johnson came to Indianapolis, it was like, what in the world just happened?
Who left Andre Johnson in Houston or Tennessee or wherever you went from?
If it had been today's day, basically it would have been like, wait a minute, they signed Andre Johnson and then they got his AI version, right? like what happened here? I thought we were signing the guy that played at Miami that was a dynamic player, and we ended up with the AI version of Andre Johnson. And as a matter of fact, sometimes people come out and are so the antithesis of what you expect from them, you say, wait a minute, is this AI? Is this a fake video? This isn't really this guy, right? And it happened last night. Eddie literally said to me, I think this might be fake. And I said, yeah, I've never seen this kind of reaction from that guy who typically, as I always say, is like one aspirin from a coma. And I don't know if somebody gave him not a 5-hour energy, but a 25-hour energy, but holy cow. I like the fire. I like the fire. And we even had to sit here. There was so much fire in it. Eddie's been sitting here for the last 30 minutes editing down the video to get enough beeps in it that it actually sounds like you're listening to the theme song to Beverly Hills Cop. We'll play for you Mike Woodson, the fired up version, next. Last night, you just heard John mention it, a lot of basketball to discuss. Pacers getting a big win over the Houston Rockets. Tyrese Haliburton back to Tyrese Haliburton ways for certain. Very, very impressive in terms of his assist-to-turnover ratio and getting everybody facilitated. Indiana very balanced offensively, led by Haliburton, who had 28 last night. And when Houston got interested in making it a game of things, and you could certainly say with the Rockets, yeah, but Jake, I mean, they're playing back-to-back, and we made plenty about the fact that the late night that they got in from Oklahoma City, but
3 a.m. is when they got to their hotel last night.
2 nights ago. Right?
No. Even last night.
2 nights ago.
No, would have been last night.
No, last night they
3
played.
a.m.
But it would have been
3 a.m. in the morning. I guess so. Yesterday morning.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is the overnight of 2 nights ago, yes, coming from Oklahoma City. But they rested a lot of their players in that game against Oak City in preparation for exactly that. But when and they're good. I mean, they've got a lot of talent, a lot of young talent. But then they obviously pulled away when it mattered, and an 18-3 run that was the separation. Purdue all over Rutgers yesterday, as was expected. Rutgers has 2 dynamic players that are young. It's just been a rough go for the Scarlet Knights all year, and Fletcher Lawyer was really good in that game. Braden Smith did Braden Smith things. Miles Colvin checked into the game at one point without anybody knowing it, which is kind of cool. I kind of like that.
Did they have 6 on the floor?
No, he substituted in for C.J. Cox, and Painter's like, that's cool, but who did – and he says – so then they had like a timeout, and he says to Colvin, he's like, who sent you in? He goes, well, you did. Painter said, no, I didn't. And Painter turns around to the bench. He says, did any of you guys – and I mean, so it wasn't malicious. It was he thought he heard his name called, so he went and checked in. They let him check in, and then they realized, no, dude, you heard something incorrectly. But then there's Indiana, who goes into Oregon. I thought the best part of the game was afterwards when Dana Altman was being interviewed and the Ducks stood in the background and hammed it up for like 2 straight minutes. It was awesome.
Quack, quack.
It's a great mascot. And you notice he wears the little ascot, right?
Yeah.
It's very
He's a
fashionable.
Sophisticated fellow.
He is. But Indiana had that game. Here they were. They had a lead with, 5 minutes to go. And I don't know why they did this, but they went back to having Renew, who has played well, and Umar Ballo on the floor at the same time. And it just seemed to slow down their offense to the point where then – and look, they had looks. They did have looks, and they just did not go down. But to go from up 1 to losing by 9 in the last 5 minutes is no bueno for sure. But afterwards, and I can appreciate the fire here, okay? I can appreciate the fire. But afterwards, even though, and Indiana did have looks, but the free throw discrepancy is a little misleading because Indiana was intentionally fouling. I mean, Oregon got, 6 free throws in the last 45 seconds of the game because Indiana was fouling, and give credit to Oregon, they were hitting those free throws. But Mike Woodson afterwards was less than thrilled with the free throw discrepancies in the game.
We had our chances, but listen, guys, in a physical game like this, it can't be 21-7. You gotta be kidding me. 21-7 on free throws. It's bullshit. It just can't be not in a physical game. They're a physical team, and it can't be that lopsided. It's impossible.
That's rare for him, right? Like, holy cow. Now, here's the thing. Is it rare for Mike Woodson to be that fired up, or is it just rare that we hear from him because he never does interviews anymore? Which is it?
I would say both. Usually it's very, I've just got to coach these guys better. I got to get more out of them.
Well, he sounds like Tone Loc, right?
Yeah.
Let's do it. I mean, he sounds just like Tone Loc. We the morning show, we used to all the time play the Tone Loc intro anytime we played Mike Woodson. But I was happy to see that he, was fired up after the game about it. Now, 21-7, okay, sure. But again, like 6 of those were in the last – if you go back and look at that game, a lot of those were by design because Indiana was having to, once they got down to the last minute, they were having to foul just to put Oregon on the line. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at it here in the second half of that game.
Bless you.
Thank you. What did Oregon hit? Six free throws to close the game?
I know they attempted 6. I don't know if they made all 6.
So before that, if you take out the last, and I'm going to look here, okay? When Indiana was leading, and were there intentional calls? No, I don't think that there were. I mean,
I think Oregon was called for 2 fouls in the final 15 minutes of that game.
I mean, I understand that, right? But here we go. In the last minute and 5 seconds of the game, Oregon made 7 free throws. So if you take that out, you're looking at 14-7 free throw disparity. Those were free throws where Indiana was intentionally sending them to the free throw line. So before that, it was 14-7 in terms of the free throw disparity. Now, when Indiana beat Ohio State in overtime, it was 23-14. Indiana advantaged free throws. I get what he is saying, but the reality is that you can nitpick something like that anytime. I didn't hear a lot of people saying. I did see one person that said the officials have thrown this game against Indiana. I get it. I mean, fans are fans. I understand that. And I understand Mike Woodson's frustration. But I don't think that it is a game that had great implication towards Indiana other than this. Yes, if they would have gotten that game, they probably stamped and punched their ticket, whatever you want to call it, for the tournament. But I don't think it necessarily sets them back greatly losing that game, assuming that they beat Ohio State. Big assumption, I realize.
Mm-hmm.
If they beat Ohio State going into the Big Ten tournament, I think they're in. But you know what? If Indiana, you mark my words right now.
Marking.
They've played well of late, don't get me wrong. And they've had adversity, and they've had the storyline of the Mike Woodson situation, and clearly all kinds of turmoil. And I think that people on the inside would tell you there's even turmoil inside the locker room at times. And they have a guy in Luke Goody who came in and finally just said, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to kind of start coaching things here a little bit and being a leader on the floor. And guys have responded to that. And Umar Ballo has played well. And Malik Renew, now that he's back from injury, has played well, right? And, Galloway hit a big shot last night. And then Oregon hit one from just outside of Portland that kind of salted, that made it really tough for Indiana at that point. But with all of that said, Indiana now finds himself at 18-12. They are a game under 500 in conference. They have a game at Assembly Hall against Ohio State, who is right there with them on the bubble. But they're both on the bubble, but Ohio State is wearing rubber galoshes and sliding all over the bubble, about to fall off of it, and Indiana's a little more firm. I think Indiana might even be, at this point, one of those that is not even in the play-in game. But if Indiana, knowing everything that's on the line and knowing the potential that they could slide right back into situation with Ohio State at home in the final game of the year, knowing that may be a senior day play-in game, if Indiana doesn't beat Ohio State in that situation, they do not deserve to be in the tournament. I'm not saying you penalize them by holding them out, but if that's the penalty for it, if the ramification of their losing at home to Ohio State is that slides them behind Ohio State in the final spot for the NCAA tournament. And yes, there's still basketball to be played in the Big Ten tournament. But if we go back and look at it, and things are still the same on Selection Sunday, where it comes down between Indiana and Ohio State, and you look at the way that they played down the stretch, and Ohio State's they've been hit or miss, I get it. And Indiana won at Ohio State, so in totality, it should cancel each other out, right? But knowing everything on the line at home, if they can't rise to the occasion in that game, then I'm not going to feel sorry for them if they don't make their way in. If they don't hear their number called, then I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. They do not deserve to get in if they don't win that game, considering everybody knows that that's potentially what's on the line for them if they were to lose it. But I don't think that losing to Oregon puts them in that position. The only thing that losing to Oregon does is if they'd beaten Oregon, then probably that Ohio State game is irrelevant. But they still have a chance for that to not be a factor. All they have to do is beat Ohio State. And it's at home. You would think that they can do it, right? They've got to get that one, though, and then not have to rely on making a deep run in the Big Ten tournament. Mike Nizilik joins us in just about 5. He's going to give us more on the fired-up Mike Woodson next. is a fun little exercise we do. And I realize it feels very condescending, which is not intended to at all. But let me give you a little glimpse behind the curtain of my life, okay? So my last name is Query, right?
Query.
And because it's Query, I have to make sure, which is a question. I think most people know that a query is a question. But as a kid, I heard variations all the time of the way that my last name is pronounced. So I'm very conscientious of pronouncing people's last names correctly.
Sensitive?
But I have, yes, sensitive, empathetic. But I have admittedly a very difficult time sometimes, at no fault of, unfortunately, other people. I have a hitch, a glitch, a brain blockage when it comes sometimes to pronouncing names or remembering the correct pronunciation of names. Now, I can tell you, like, sure as the fact that today is Wednesday, that the state fish of Hawaii is the humuhumanukanukuapwaha. Like, I know that, right?
Yep.
I took Swahili in college. I know that, for example, saying Jamba Wanafuzi would be hello, friend, in Swahili, and I was Bwanam Kubwa, big man. But sometimes we record people saying their last name. We did this with our friend Dustin from the Indianapolis Star, which, because I couldn't get it right, and now we know.
Dopirak.
Yes, and then, of course, our other friend from the Indianapolis Star that covers Indiana, Zach.
Osterman.
We do that, and then we play that so that we make sure. So Mike from the Bloomington Herald, and not Telephone, but Times now, used to be Telephone, joins us on the guest line and probably is going to be angry with me on this. But, Mike, do you understand my compassion in asking you to pronounce your last name so that we can record it, and then for my own safety, we never get it wrong? Is that okay?
I appreciate the effort. I don't take it personally if my name's ever mispronounced, but it is just Nizalik.
Okay, now hold on. Which I said it correct earlier, so I'm happy with that. But if we could, we're going to have you say it very clearly here so Eddie can record it. That would be Mike
Nizalik.
Perfect. All right, Mike Nizalik. And it is now. When did it no longer become the Bloomington Herald Telephone?
I don't. I should probably know that trivia, right? I don't know. I go back in the archives though, and it does make me laugh.
I know.
The telephone part of it all.
I mean, it literally sounds like it was, like poor Bob Hamill was having to churn out telegrams. You know what I mean?
He when you go back and look at the amount of work that he put in on a daily basis, I mean, it makes me want to work harder just based on how much. I mean, it's just volumes of work every day he put in.
Yeah, I mean. And that paper was obviously, as still the case, known for its coverage of Indiana basketball. That is obviously, Mike, why we have you on the program again. I appreciate it. We had rave reviews from your first appearance on the program, so it is much appreciated. Let's get to what happened last night in Eugene. First off, Mike Woodson fired up about the free throw count late in that game. And, yes, Oregon was very physical. I get it. But at the same time, I look at it and go, yeah, they were physical, but that doesn't explain Indiana's offensive futility, especially once they decided to go with both bigs on the floor at the same time late in the game. Mike Woodson's anger, justified or not?
I think so. Here's what I'll say, because I think a lot of people, and this is in the story too, because I think it's worth, because like when you come up with questions for after the games, like free throws was not, the disparity was not on my list because 8 of Oregon's free throws came with less than a minute 5 left.
Exactly what I just said. Yeah. Yes.
And so it's sort of like, well, yeah, there was a disparity, but if you take those 8 free throws away, it was like 5, I think, total, 12-7. And so but the fouls also 15-12. Indiana had 15, Oregon had 12. So I mean, not like so imbalanced. Sometimes you'll see it like 35-15, and you're like, well, yeah, obviously one side was getting the whistle. I just thought they let him play. And I think maybe his frustration was that there were some times where Nate Biddle got some calls that Umar Ballo and Malik Renew didn't. They combined for 3 free throw attempts. Biddle had 6 before that last stretch and had 2 more kind of down in that last minute. But so maybe that's where I think the frustration came in, that he wanted that to be a little more even, or it was just, I don't know, because I didn't think that it was called in favor of Oregon, if that makes sense. Like, it was a physical game, but I don't think they sort of benefited, and I don't think that tilted the outcome, to me at least.
Where is Indiana different, or how, I guess I should say, Mike? How is Indiana different now versus 6 weeks ago?
Well, it's hard, right? Like, they took another step back. Like, you look at that last 2 minutes, that was sort of reminiscent of some of the errors they had against Maryland and the first game against Purdue. And so you sort of see that same team kind of creeping up. But then you look at a Washington game, and, like, that's the team you kind of thought they would be, right, at the start of the season with all the talent they have. And it's just sort of I don't think they're much different. I think this team is what it is, and it's just an inconsistent team. You know, they played better for a week, stretch or 2 week stretch, 1, 4, 5, knocked off 2 ranked teams, but they still do sometimes, just make baffling errors. He was very frustrated, sort of. They didn't score after, last minute 30 last night. The game wasn't lost when the 3-pointer went in for Oregon. But they just sort of crumbled. And so you sort of say, like, yeah, this is why this season's where it's at, right? And he's kind of mentioned that a couple of times. He's like, if one of these, if 1 or 2 of these games go our way, talking about the Marylands or, the Purdues and things like that, this team's not on a bubble. This team's not having these conversations, but in large part, these games have gone against them.
When you look, Mike, at the way that things in the last – and, yes, I get that the Malik Renew's health is probably a big factor here, right? And I think Luke Goody has really emerged as kind of a leader for Indiana in the last quarter of the season. But do you believe that this team is more relaxed since there has been clarity on the Mike Woodson situation?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's more just clarity that, it's just that I don't know, like that some of their goals they didn't reach, right? They're not going to win the Big Ten. And so maybe that's just sort of free them of like, look, we could just, we just need to string some wins together. I think Woodson's answer a couple of weeks ago was that they during when they lost 8 of 10, everything kept going wrong, and they didn't really have anything to believe in, right? And so they were kind of struggling. So they needed one win, that Michigan State game, to sort of start believing again in sort of themselves. And that was kind of proof that they could do this, and that kind of set them up for success. It's just a hard question. You see it. You see glimpses of what this team could be, and I think that's kind of the hard part for fans is like you could see what it was supposed to look like, and it just hasn't gotten there.
Joining us now, by the way, on the always busy and available for your company to sponsor guest line is our friend from the Bloomington Herald-Times, Michael
Nizilik.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Joining us now. See how we did it, Michael? It's easy that way.
That's good. That's good.
Michael, right now, your gut, Selection Sunday. Let's say Indiana does what we expect them to do in the Big Ten tournament, which is, maybe win a game or two, but let's say they don't win the Big Ten tournament and they don't make it into the finals of the Big Ten tournament. Are they a tournament team?
Well, here's the trick. So I think if they lose against Ohio State and then were to lose a first round, because they have to win Saturday to avoid a first round game. But if they don't, they play like I think they'd be slotted to play USC. I'm not sure if that's like locked or not, that opponent. But if they lose back to back like that, lose their last 3, I think they'd be really they'd be leaving it in the committee's hands, and it'd be a tough, right? I think that'd be a real genuine bubble team. I think if they beat Ohio State, they're in no matter what happens in the Big Ten tournament. So I think this game is, really big to sort of kind of, because I think that most brackets kind of had them as the last 4 out last 4 buys before the Oregon loss. And I mean, that was a quad 1 loss on the road. I don't think you get penalized for that too much.
Correct. I agree with that.
Yeah. And so, but I think losing to Ohio State and then losing in the first round of the Big Ten tournament would be like worst case scenario and put them in a really bad spot.
I guess the penalty.
I do think they need a win.
The penalty for losing that, if this makes sense, okay? The penalty of losing the Oregon game, there is no penalty for that other than the penalty of missing out on a really good win. Does that make sense?
Well, and also putting more pressure on yourself to avoid it, because I think you want to avoid a first-round game at all costs in the Big Ten tournament. You don't want to play that Wednesday. You want to play on Thursday. So it just made it a little more difficult, obviously, because you just need the 1 or 2. You beat that Oregon. You win the Oregon, and it takes all pressure off for Ohio State, right? But now it's kind of, I think, must-win sort of territory for them.
I'm going to make a statement, Michael, and I want you to tell me how absurd it sounds to you. We're gonna play. You and I don't necessarily know one another. I'm a transparent guy. I'm being transparent for the audience, right? We know each other in this capacity. I reached out to you. You came on the show. We've exchanged messages in that regard. We got a mutual admiration society going on here, right? But we're not necessarily going to Yogi's or upstairs and having drinks together, right? We haven't met in that capacity. So I'm asking you to be transparent in this. I'm going to make a statement, and then I want you to be honest with me. I want you to tell me whether or not you would say to other people, that was the most absurd thing that this guy said, or this guy actually is fairly dialed in, okay?
Okay.
The contract extension of Dusty May and the situation with Brad Stevens, while both on the surface would appear as though Indiana has to completely turn the page from both, the latest is that Dusty May's financials did not put it out of the stratosphere of Indiana being able to buy it out, and Brad Stevens might also have financial situations that would put things on hold but not completely rule him out of the possibility still of Indiana. Therefore, those two guys, albeit perhaps just a glimmer of it, are still more in play than outsiders would think when it comes to the Indiana job. Your thoughts?
I don't think that's crazy in terms of, like, with Dusty May, like, the devil was always in the details, right? Like, if the buyout, like, the buyout number was what mattered, not the, like, sort of what the extension was on paper, like how many years or how much extra money. It was the buyout protection. Like, did Michigan sort of lock him in? Like, because I think, and I don't know, I haven't seen any sort of reporting on it. Like, Mick Cronin is an example of a guy with reportedly like a $10 million buyout. And, like, when you're paying, nothing's official yet in terms of what Woodson's separation agreement is, but if you're paying that, you've got revenue sharing coming up, you're paying the new coach, you're paying the new staff. $10 million seems to be like a very intimidating number. Half of that, not so much. And so, like, those things matter. And with Brad Stevens, the denial, the quote wasn't to me like a denial, so you don't know what the context of that
Correct.
was.
And for
so,
that,
like,
for those that are unfamiliar, Michael, I want to go back to that.
Sure.
The report came out with Brad Stevens that said Stevens is not a candidate. And then the quote from Brad Stevens simply was, "I love the people I work with the Boston Celtics." I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
So there was nothing that came out of Stevens' mouth that said, because there's a difference. If Stevens had said, "I am not a candidate because I love the people I'm working with in Boston," that's one thing. But it sounded to me like the quote was and I know that people that are not Indiana fans are like, "Guys, get over it. He ain't coming." I get it. But I don't think that totally shut the door to your point.
Yeah, and I think it's admittedly like a long shot, but my point is like, and I'm not questioning. Was it Jeff Goodman? I think was the one with the report. I'm not questioning his reporting, but the quote didn't sort of say, "I'm ruling this out." It says, did not. It was not very specific, right? It's like, well, I'm happy now. Well, yeah. I mean, maybe you could be happy in Bloomington, right? Like, we don't know what the context was, how the question was asked or phrased, because when he was a coach and dealing with these questions the last time, you're on camera, you're dealing with, you could kind of see the context of it, right? And so, like, those do matter. I think both of them are still long shots. But like I said, with the buyout with May, it was always sort of, I think you had to see the number to sort of know what kind of long shot it was, because if it's, like I said, 10 figures to me seems, or 10 million seems like a number that's just really hard to square when, you just had layoffs. They're trying to set the table up for these teams to be successful because of revenue sharing and things like that. And to just throw all that money at a new staff and a buyout, that gets cost prohibitive at some point. But if you've got the guy and you believe in him so much, you're going to try. But I do think it has to make sense financially. So no, I wouldn't say you're crazy.
By the way, are you at the airport now, coming back?
Yes.
Okay, so are you getting ready to board? It sounds like people are boarding. Are you?
No. I am just. Tried to find a quiet.
Are you in the Portland airport? Or if you're not in the Portland airport, then let me guess where you are. But are you flying out of Portland, or are you on a layover currently?
Layover.
Okay,
layover.
Excellent. If you don't mind me asking this kind of personal information, Michael, can you give me the first letter of the airline you're flying, and then I'll tell you where your layover is. A, okay. I'm going to guess currently, and I'm going to get 3 guesses here if you don't mind me doing so. I'm going to guess that you're in Dallas-Fort Worth.
No, you might not get this because I took 2 different airlines to get back.
Gotcha.
I flew because American does not go to Eugene, and so I flew from Eugene back to Seattle, and now I'm in Seattle waiting to go back to Indianapolis.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So it was a trick. I didn't want you to.
For what it's worth, by the way, if you are ever laid over in the Dallas airport, gate A52, they have a 7-Eleven that has 7-Eleven outside airport prices. It's the best kept secret in all of flying, just so you know.
That's good to know. Yeah,
okay, lastly,
I'll file that one away.
Give me a name. You're going to give 2 answers here in conclusion, Mike. I want you to give me a name that you have felt like would be a candidate for Indiana that just seems to persistently be hanging in that category and has not really been eliminated or crossed off the list. And then I want you to give me a name of one that has popped up of late that you didn't anticipate, but you now think could be a candidate.
Well, the first one, and it's the same answer. I think you asked sort of a similar question last week about like guys that I think might fit. I think Brad Bonnell is Clemson's coach, still sort of checks a lot of the boxes for me. I just think that what he's done without the NIL support, he's kind of had to drum it up himself. Imagine having to not worry about that and be like just coaching basketball, right, and have the pick of the roster you want. I think he could do really good things here, and obviously has Indiana ties. And I do think that it's not ties to IU specifically, but ties to the state. I do think that sort of matters here. That does buy you some cachet with the fan base. In terms of like the surprise candidate, I think it's going to be like if there is a surprise candidate, I think it's going to be someone we don't name. Like I think I thought Kirsten was not a surprise in terms of like what they were looking for from a football coach, but we're talking about basketball, like the field. It's like, are they talking to NBA guys? Are they talking to guys that like are not in coaching right now or taking a break? Like, I think when you talk about a surprise, it's something that you're sort of not on the radar that people aren't talking about. So I don't know. I don't know what that name would be. I think it could be. I mean, it could be a surprise, and I think that's part of what the search is going to be. They're going to do due diligence and really cast a wide net to sort of get this right, because I think there is. I do think Scott Dolson feels, not from the outside, I think internally, pressure to sort of get this right. Like, this is the last piece. You fix football. This is it, right? This is the last piece of the puzzle with all the success they're having sort of across the athletic programs. Like, the crown jewel is basketball, and you need to get it right.
By the way, I was going with American Airlines via Dallas. You're obviously on Alaska Airlines, right?
No, American.
Oh, really?
American.
Okay.
Yes.
Because Alaska has a nonstop from Seattle. All I will tell you is this. Eddie Garrison will back me up on this. If you are at the airport and you're hankering for a snack, Michael, and you get some gummies in Seattle, be very careful. Double check before getting on the plane, right? Just want to make sure of that.
I will be careful.
Okay.
I will be careful.
Michael, safe travels. Appreciate it, man.
I will talk soon. Thanks for having me on again. It was fun.
Joining us on the guest line from the Bloomington Herald-Times, that is our friend Michael
Nizilik,
who joins us on the show. Now, Eddie, you are going to Seattle in about a month, right?
41 days.
Not that you're counting.
No.
So and you're wearing a Seattle sweatshirt right now.
I am.
For those that are unfamiliar and are new to the program, you have gone to Seattle once in your life, and beforehand I had told you that it is my favorite city in the country, right?
Yeah.
What led you to spontaneously decide to make Seattle a trip for the two of you?
So are you talking about the first time or the second time?
So you've been twice now.
So I will be.
I'm talking about the first time, like when you went a year ago was the first time, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So what made you decide, and you obviously loved it, correct?
Yeah, we loved it, yeah. We were there for 5 days.
And so you're going back. So what made you the first time decide, of all places, that Seattle was where you were going to take a 5-day spring trip?
So I wanted to get into hockey, and I was trying to decide on a team that I wanted to root for. And the conclusion I came to was, with my job as the Pacers producer, it needed to be a team on the West Coast. That way, when I get home from games at 11 o'clock or later, I can watch most, if not all, of the hockey game. And if it's like a team in the Eastern time zone, most of the time they overlap, and I wouldn't be able to watch. So it came down to the LA Kings and the Seattle Kraken. I didn't want to go with the Vegas Knights because they had just won the Stanley Cup, and I didn't want to be viewed as a guy that was jumping on that bandwagon. So then the final straw in splitting hairs between the LA Kings and the Seattle Kraken, between me and Olivia, were the fact that Seattle would be easier to go to either once a year to go watch a match, a game, or just to visit than LA, between flights and hotels and, Ubers and whatnot. So last year we decided to go.
Yeah, have you been to LA?
I have been to LA,
Okay.
yes. So we decided to go last year. It was the final or second to last home game. It was the final home game for the Seattle Kraken, and coincidentally, the Cincinnati Reds also happened to be out there at the same time. So we killed two birds with one stone. I wanted to try to get to all of the ballparks in Major League Baseball, so it gave us a reason to go out there, watch the Kraken, and then watch the Reds and cross off T-Mobile Park.
Okay, and then did you in any way, shape, or form develop an appreciation or affinity for the Seattle Mariners?
No.
But the stadium's nice, right?
Stadium is nice, yeah, I will give you that.
And
Give them that, yeah.
So you're going back in April, right?
Yeah, we're going for 2 days, and then we're going to go to Vegas for 3.
Oh, so you're going to a game, though, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. It's the season finale.
And you're aware of what the Kraken is aside from cryptocurrency, correct?
Yes, and guess what? The Kraken are playing the LA Kings, so
Really?
it's only fitting, yeah.
Would you like to elaborate for people that are unfamiliar what Kraken is?
It's a sea creature.
Correct. It's a giant squid, right? Mythical, not a real thing,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, it's a mythical sea creature.
I mean, it's kind of cool. It's a cool name. I don't like the color scheme, though. But when you went there, so now on a 1 to 10 scale, how big a fan would you say you are of the Kraken?
6.5.
So you haven't totally bought in.
Correct, because I'm still learning like the nuances of hockey.
Okay. I think, and I'm with you on that. The Sabres, up and down year this year, my buddies and I have adopted the Buffalo Sabres.
They won last night,
But
right?
I think that, I've got to look, like I said, to your point about like the ups and downs of the fandom, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think hockey, maybe somebody who is a diehard of hockey can tell me this. I've always felt this about hockey. I've always felt like hockey and auto racing are very similar. If you grow up in a city that has it, you have an understanding or a familiarity of it, and therefore you can appreciate it a little bit more. But if you don't grow up around it, I think you think it's more complicated than it is. And every time that I watch, last night San Jose, by the way, defeated the Sabres 6-2.
Okay.
Dan Ruzanowski, who I do IndyCar radio with on the West Coast, is the voice of the San Jose Sharks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, good dude. So anytime that I'm watching hockey, though, I'm under the assumption that it's more intricate than what I'm watching. And I think it's actually simpler than I'm making it out to be, and therefore it's intimidating to try to learn it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But you watch how many games? Like,
We watched last night's game, so how many have they played? I guess.
are you upset when they lose, like last night when they lost to the Wild?
No, I expect them to lose most nights. As of right now.
Well, it's good to know that you're an optimistic fan.
Year one of the new coach.
Can you tell? Let me ask you this, and then we'll move on. I promise, because we have tickets to give away for Pantera. The Kraken have played, and is it hockey match or hockey game? It's game, right?
It's game because the good old hockey game.
That's right. They've played 62 games. They've won how many?
25.
They are sandwiched between two teams within the Pacific Division in terms of the standings. Both play in California. What are the two teams?
I'm going to guess San Jose would be one.
Okay.
The other would be not the LA Kings. Kings are actually pretty good. Anaheim?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, Anaheim just whooped up on Edmonton last night.
My Sabres, on the other hand, 24, 30, and 6 through 60 games. Tickets for Pantera to give away. We're going to do that next. Should we do trivia or get to know your listener, Eddie? We will allow you to make that decision.
What did we do yesterday? That way I have something to base it off
yesterday we just did get to know. No, we did trivia about Pantera, and actually the caller knew that they were from Arlington, Texas, which was incredibly impressive.
Really?
Yes, incredibly impressive.
Now, was he a Pantera
He said he was
fan?
a Pantera fan.
Okay.
But we will allow Eddie to decide the fashion in which we're giving away tickets for Pantera. September 5th is when that concert is taking place. and it is taking place at Ruoff. We will do so lining up callers. Do not call early. We'll call you for a false start, but you can begin, if you'd like, to call right now at 239-1070, better known as 239-1070, and we'll give away the tickets on the other side. Telling you. You look outside right now, I'm assuming. Let me check my phone, see what the weather's like outside right now. Granted, we could just ask one of the callers, but as I look at my phone, I will tell you it's 38 degrees. And last night, it's 38 and raining. Last night, I had to take my car to get it dropped off to get some work done.
There's snowflakes, Jake, is what I'm seeing possible at 4 o'clock today.
Yeah, I mean, negatory, right?
And 9 tonight?
Is there any – I would rather drive – I want to know if this makes me unique.
Anything makes you unique,
I would
Jake,
rather
come on,
drive in snow and ice than last night driving at night in the rain.
Ooh, this is a fascinating one.
So let me explain, and we'll get to the Pantera tickets September 5th in just a moment. My car is, I've got a 2018 Jeep Grand Cherokee. I took it to my buddy Darren that does fabulous work and has always babied my car for me, and the check engine light was on, and he said, hey, this is something that's probably under your warranty, so you have to take it to the dealer. No problem. So I called the dealer. Hey, we can get to it on Wednesday. This was last week. We're backed up. We can get to it on Wednesday. I said, perfect. How about if I drop it off on Tuesday night, leave the key in the drop box? That way you've got it first thing in the morning. You can let me know, I will get a rental car for the day. Yeah, no problem, because it's a fairly easy job. And they said to me, and they even have it in the little printout, under warranty. Great. So I dropped the car off last night, but in driving last night, and I had somebody follow me so I could drop the car off, but it was that rain-night combination, and there were also some barrels because of one of the roads that I was on was having some construction. And I know that I'm getting older, but I'm like, it is impossible to see the lines on the, you know what I mean? Like, you just get that. It is weird, man.
I miss the days when they had the reflector lights in the lanes.
Totally. And they totally need that. So I dropped the car off, and then I checked right before we went on the air, and it still shows as not having been checked in. And I'm like, well, I realized that when it says my appointment's at 7:30 in the morning, it doesn't really mean they're going to get it in at 7:30. But I called just to check, and the guy said, oh, yeah, we're totally shorthanded and backed up. It might be Friday before we can get to it.
You should send in the bill for the rental car.
For real, because I'm like, if you'd have told me that ahead of time, that's fine. I have no problem with that. If you'd said to me ahead of time, listen, we will get to it when we can, but it could be a couple days, understood. But don't have me drop it off the night before and tell me it's going to be taken care of that day. And then he says, plus we have to check the warranty. Like, well, I have on the report here that it's under warranty. Anyway, so we'll see what comes of it.
But I am with you, Jake. That's
brutal.
Yeah. Especially if you're not in a well-lit area.
That's what I mean. It was kind of and then you get the occasional light, and it reflects off of the water, and you're like, what is going on here?
Yes.
Who do we have lined up in terms of our callers, Eddie?
Let's go with Jeremy.
Jeremy, I want you to just close your eyes right now, Jeremy, unless you're driving. Are you driving, Jeremy?
Pulled over.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
I just pulled over.
It's very important because safety first on this program, okay?
You got it.
So now that you're pulled over, Jeremy, now are you pulled over in your passenger car? Do you have a work vehicle? What are we driving here?
I'm in a work vehicle right now, Jake.
Okay, and what kind of work vehicle? We talking truck, big rig? What do we got?
Yeah, big truck.
Can you hit the horn for me real quick, Jeremy?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Yes, love that. All right, Jeremy. Okay, so Jeremy, I want you to close your eyes real quick and just envision this because it's crappy outside, right?
Okay, right.
I want you to envision a clear sky, the kind of clear sky night with no humidity where you can see the stars, you can see Venus up there in the sky. It's beautiful, right? It's just perfect. Nice, perfect 70-degree temperature, beautiful. And you are just sitting there enjoying the sounds of Pantera on a Friday night. I think it's a Friday, September the 5th. Going to be a perfectly crisp, nice night. And you're at Ruoff and you're listening to Pantera and you're enjoying it. But, of course, you need tickets to be able to go. And so, therefore, you're in the running here for tickets. But my understanding is, Jeremy, that this is the first time that you've called the program. Now, is that an accurate statement?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So, Jeremy, you sound like a fun guy. If you don't mind me asking, like if I was going to have a PBR party, would you come to my PBR party, Jeremy?
Absolutely.
Diet Coke's perfectly sufficient. Okay. By the way, I'm having one on March 15th, just so you know. Okay.
Right.
Jeremy, a couple questions for you in terms of our get to know your listener. Okay.
Okay.
The first would be this: how old a fella are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'll be 47, Jake. That's how old I am right now.
47. Okay. So when's your birthday?
In July, 77.
Okay.
Yep.
So that would mean, I'm guessing, that you're the graduating class somewhere around 1995. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that was from what high school, Jeremy?
I'm actually from Vincennes. I'm an Alice from Lincoln.
Oh,
Lincoln
that's cool.
Alice.
And
Yeah.
what's the name of the gal that brought you to Indianapolis?
Marissa.
Okay. Now, Jeremy, you and Marissa have kids, Jeremy?
Yes, we do. We
Okay.
have one.
You just sound like a fun guy. Now, this is the first time you've called the show. How long have you listened to the show?
Oh, for years. Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm usually just driving, so yeah.
Okay, so for years you listen to the show, and you like or don't like the show, or is your radio broken?
No, I love the show. Yeah.
Okay. Who is your favorite sports team, Jeremy? If you could pick now, I'm not saying who you're predicting, but if you had the ability to guarantee a championship for one sports team, what team would you pick because it's the team that you most root for?
Right now, the Pacers. Let's go.
All
yeah.
right. Jeremy, I think you'd be fun to take to a Pacer game too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jeremy. Can we get one more horn blast from you, by the way?
You got it, Jake.
Yes, I love that. All right, Jeremy, here's what we're going to do. Your birthday's in July. We're going to get you the tickets for Pantera so you can enjoy it in September. When you are at the do you like Pantera, by the way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
I've seen
that's
them
cool.
multiple times.
All right. And then you're going to come on September 5th. You're going to be enjoying the show, and you are going to, during that show, at some point, raise a drink in the air, Diet Coke, perfectly sufficient, and you're going to wish me a happy birthday because my birthday's 2 days before it, but you're going to be at Pantera, and it's going to be a great night. You and Marissa enjoy it, all right?
All right. Thanks much, guys.
Eddie will get your information. Don't hang up. Eddie will get all of your information. See, that's what I like to do. Sounds like a fun guy, right?
You're not talking about a mushroom, right?
What's that?
You're not talking about like a mushroom, right?
No, he is not he's not a mushroom fun guy. He is a fun man. How's that? He sounds like a fun dude. A fun dude.
Very energetic.
He is that. That was a good call. All right, we'll come back. We will put a tie on all of it. Recap what happened last night, hand it off to John. We'll do it on the other side. Eddie, I'm curious of this.
Yes.
When you go to Seattle, I'm going to name for you a couple of people that are native to Seattle, and I want you to tell me if in your age bracket, your age demographic, if it moves the needle at all.
Okay.
Okay? The first one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you knew of this because I had told it to you, and you might have even gone, I can't remember if you went to the house. Kurt Cobain.
Correct. Yes, we went to. We could not obviously get to the house, but there was a shrine because we had. It was either the week prior or 2 weeks before was the. I don't want to say anniversary of his death,
Right,
but
the date of his passing.
Yeah.
Right? And it was it wasn't it. Well, he died in 94, right? So it would have been the 30-year mark, right?
Yeah.
When you were there, okay. If you are aware of that, then Chris Cornell would be another one. Would that move the needle for you?
I
that's
only
probably
know
the wrong word when talking about these guys.
No, I only know of Cobain because of Nirvana.
Okay, so not Chris Cornell.
No, what's his significance?
Well, he also was Cornell was Soundgarden was the band that he was most known for. Audioslave as well, but he was part of the grunge movement along with Cobain, and that whole it really is fascinating to explain almost the oddity. I don't know that there has been a city that we have seen in the last 30 years that has undergone a boom. Austin, Texas, maybe, but that has undergone the pop cultural relevant boom that Seattle did in the early 90s, the first half of the 90s, from basically 1990 to 95, when Nirvana hit the scene and Pearl Jam kind of simultaneously, and then Soundgarden. And then you had, obviously, the collaboration music of both that was then released after those guys had already made it big in Temple of the Dog. But when the movie Singles came out, and that also took place in Seattle, the Sonics were really good at that time, and so they were kind of an it team. And literally everybody between the ages of 15 and 25 in the U.S. was aspiring to end up in Seattle. In all honesty, it's a big part of, and this is really naive of me to say, but Microsoft was so big and all that, and Bill Gates, but I think a big part of the launch of Amazon was people who were collegiately educated that graduated from colleges around the Midwest that moved out to Seattle in the early to mid-90s and just wanted to live in Seattle and were willing to work a job just to live there and began working in the early advent of Amazon. And you heard of people like, yeah, I moved out to Seattle and I'm driving a forklift for this book sale place and whatever else. And so manpower was never an issue. And so it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then suddenly, boom. I mean, and Seattle was such an it place that everybody wanted to go towards. It is a beautiful city. I mean, no question about it. I know it's got its challenges now because like a lot of cities, Austin, Texas, I think is going through this right now. It grew almost too fast. I mean, Austin, when you go to Austin and you put in your phone anything to get somewhere for dinner and it says, 3 miles or 58 minutes. And you're like, what? Because they're still trying to build infrastructure and roads and bridges, whatever else. Okay. Sir Mix-a-Lot.
A little bit. Another city/state like that is Denver.
Yeah,
Denver has really blown up in the last 10 years.
Totally. Boise's going to be the next one that I predicted happens with, by the way. Okay, Sir Mix-a-Lot, you said yes or no? Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Because Bruce Lee also, okay, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great people from Seattle. Around that time in the mid-'90s, I was working at Marsh Supermarket. JMV is wearing his T-shirt.
My Posse's on Broadway.
Yeah, heck yeah.
That's played on the JMV Takeover before. It was heavily edited.
Posse on Broadway?
No,
Yeah.
Why is that, John?
Huh?
So I
It
wonder
was
why.
heavily edited. On the JMV Takeover. I
Larry
don't
is the
know
white
if they
guy
know
who makes
that
a
or
lot of
not,
money.
But Express Yourself,
Great
NWA
one.
has played before the
It's a great
JMV
one.
Takeover. Here's one. No Vaseline by Ice Cube. And it was every other word was a beep.
Had to be, right?
Yeah.
What about Slick Rick? You ever
I
played
mean,
Slick
just at
Rick
the
on there?
beginning. Blank. y'all set it off. I mean, right out of the gate, Ice Cube comes out with something you had to bleep.
If you could play a children's story by Slick Rick on there, that'd be awesome. I'm a huge fan of that
It's
song.
in the system. Because
It's great.
What they don't know is I get into TLC and Hot 100.9's catalog.
Of course.
And they have the stuff all edited down, whereas I don't have to go back and do it myself. So,
What's on the big show today, John? A lot of basketball talk, right?
Yeah, we're going to do Dustin DePurek. You struggle pronouncing his name. He joins us to talk about the game last night. Sidney Parrish, the senior from IU, is going to join us. Who else? Catherine Legg. Is Catherine Legg going to run on the 500 this year or give it a try?
I would think there's probably going to be an opportunity for her, whether it be with Dale Coyne or Rahal Letterman again, or it depends on if somebody can get a car.
This weekend, Avondale, Phoenix.
Sidney Parrish, I guess, probably had a keen eye and interest in last night's game because Oregon and Indiana, the two teams for which she's played.
Yep. And they get Oregon tomorrow, by the way, too, in the 8-9 game.
Mike Woodson not pleased about the officiating.
He was not. He dropped a BS and an F-bomb and everything right there.
I was just happy he was doing an interview.
Yeah, I know. Who was he talking to? Just like two people? I felt bad for Don. I heard Don with you on Monday, and you could tell he was in the early stages of being sick. That thing must have hit him like a hammer.
Now, we have a colleague that came in today. I'm not going to say any names. I don't want to call anybody out. But he came in today and got on me saying that I got him sick because I've got a cold. And I'm like, I don't
He
have
said
a
the
cold.
same thing to me because I have a cold, too.
Do you have a cold?
Yeah. I probably dictated terms on the cold. If anybody started around here, it's probably me.
I'm moving away from you right now. I don't want to get it.
I'm good. I can live with it, though. So I played,
You're not worried about
I played well last night. I'm going to hoop again tonight, too.
Where'd you hoop yesterday?
Center Grove.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll go to Greenwood Christian tonight where I can drop about 5 or 6 F-bombs in there.
Yeah, that's nice.
They appreciate that.
I used to always like, and I don't know if this is still the case. Do you remember the old, and you playing a lot more? I mean, I'm retired from my playing days.
Hey, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. Mike Freeman called me this morning from Butler, and we're going to get the media people back together.
Yeah, they
for
used to
some
do
pickup
Hinkle all the
games.
time,
Yeah,
right?
Mike, because Chris Gall mentioned that to me last week at the Combine, and Mike Freeman called and said, yeah, get that going.
You gonna get Denary out there?
What's that?
You gonna get Denary out there?
JJ, I bet will play. JJ, I don't know if Denary will or not. He might, but JJ will play. JJ's played before. I always tell the Philip B. Wilson story of not getting a pass in the low post and taking his glasses off and then throwing it and hitting the goal because he was
Wilson
mad.
did?
Huh?
Philip B. Wilson did?
Yeah, way back in the day. We were playing media hoops on a Tuesday, and he was posted up, and nobody fed the post to him, and he got mad and threw his glasses and broke them.
Do you remember and I'm assuming this is still the case in some places, a lot of churches had this.
Yeah.
The floors that were like kind of the hardened rubber.
Yeah, it's awful.
Are there places that still have that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because those places that, for one, hardwood's really expensive. You got to maintain it all the time. And then the multi-use stuff is in. Like Center Grove has a big field house, and a couple of their floors is that multi-use bull crap that just shreds your knees. But I understand it because you've got to have different sports working out.
Back in the day when I played, the first years that I played basketball, and I played for the Jordan White travel team, and we would go and play. And I'm assuming most of these are a lot of the different boys clubs. Wheeler had a really good boys club, but a lot of the places that we would play back in those days, in the early '80s, they were the tile.
Yeah,
like the
tile.
Old, elementary schools would have tile floors.
And
right?
that's what they had at the Bedford Boys Club. I played for the Bedford Boys Club. We went to Marion to the Powell Club in 1978, and this was the couple of days before the blizzard of '78, and I had to guard Derek Keys of Marion, and he dunked on an 8-foot goal in like the second grade. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I cried because he was so good, and I couldn't do anything with him. He just killed me, and I cried because I was the biggest wuss ever. So
I'm trying to think. I remember going to the Anderson Boys Club.
Yep.
And it was intimidating because we went to the Anderson Boys Club and seeing the mural on the wall with like Bobby Wilkerson and Tolbert and those guys, painted, and Troy Lewis painted on the wall. And I'm like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean?
What the irony of my years, I mentioned this yesterday, we were always ousted basically in that first game of the sectional. My mom taught at Bedford North Lawrence, and she always wanted me to go. Had I gone to Bedford North Lawrence, I could have gone to a couple of Final Fours. Instead, I go to Eastern, and
you know what would have happened, though?
We sucked.
You'd have gone to that Final Four in '87. when Bailey was a freshman, and then you would have had to guard Derek Keys.
I cried again
in the morning game. In the morning game, right?
I would have cried again. Who was that? Like Rusty Garrison?
Garrison.
Rusty Garrison was the guy that
Tom
was guarding
Carnegie
him.
when he's I put up one time on social media. It was so awesome back when Carnegie would do, and now the starting combination for the Giants, and then he does it for B&L, and for Rusty Garrison. Rusty Garrison, the way that he could do his voice and the crowd's going crazy, man,
Greg
it was awesome.
Pittman. I played. Those guys were
there was
all
a
on
Jay
my team.
Somebody.
Jay Ritter.
Jay Ritter. Yeah.
Jay Ritter was Olytic, and he was also on that team that in '78 went up to Marion.
What year did B&L consolidate, and what schools would have consolidated into B&L?
Well, that would have been Olytic, Bedford. Like our good friend Jason Hatfield listening right now would probably better know than
Mitchell,
me. Tunnelton, I think that's where J.R. Holmes started, Bloomington South in Tunnelton, Indiana. That would have been another
Mitchell's not one of them, right?
Heltonville,
where
David Bailey was from.
That's where Bailey's from.
Yeah. And then obviously Mitchell was its own. There are only 2 schools in Lawrence County. Needmore was another one, I think, that was maybe a high school that consolidated.
Do you know,
Bedford,
John,
Lawrence.
this is amazing, considering I went to IU. Do you know that I've, A, never been to Bedford, and B, I never went to the quarries?
You never hung out with Bedford girls before? Oh, my God.
Well, I mean.
Aquanet and Boone's Farm. I'm going to tell you. Aquanet and Boone's Farm, and
Bedford
you're tripping
girls
the
had a very good
fantastic
reputation
with the girls from Lawrence County, buddy, let me tell you.
Yeah, no, Bedford girls had a very good reputation.
The only time I went to jail was because of the girls in Lawrence County. Yeah.
Now, Boone's Farm was also, I had a girl that I hung out with in college from Lafayette that was into Boone's Farm. That was
Shawswick is another one. Greg Rakestraw mentioned Shawswick. That's where Damon played, I think, junior high.
Correct.
For Shawswick.
That's in Season on the Brink, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So,
all right, John's up next. We'll continue reminiscing about different. Actually, yesterday
Bedford
people were like,
girls.
man,
I'm all excited now. Aquanet and Boone's Farm. So their hair will look good and they'll puke all over your bed.
You didn't have to pull the hair back while they're puking. It just stood upright anyway, right?
You don't have to hold it back. They can puke all over your bed.
That's right. All right, John's up next. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow. We thank you for listening to Query & Company.